buttons at the bottom.
The square.
Square buttons.
We can draw it.
Where is it?
Here's
Gimme.
Marker.
I'm gonna do my shit square.
All right, so we're just jumping in, basically. Hey, put it on. The camera isn't on the right spot there. The shit square. Still can't see it. Anyways, so we're just jumping in right now because you can plan forever and sit here and talk about stuff and have conversations, and will it be coherent, will it not, will it ever lead anywhere, will we ever be truly ready to start a meeting? The answer is no, and the kind of purpose of these is to have a conversation. So we are not necessarily even continuing off from the last time, although we try to keep it in mind. It doesn't always work out that way. In fact, most of the time
Yeah, it's been quite a bit.
does not.
It's been quite a bit of a delay between the times, so that is meant to be
Not to mention, yeah, it's been over a month.
it's meant to be a search icon.
Over a month. So we have been. Is it loud enough? I think. Seems a bit quiet on the test. I don't think I need to bump that up, but I can bump this a little bit over here. Bump it up. Yeah, there you go. All right. Oh, that's too much. Too much. A little bit too much. All right. So in the I thought you were going for a washroom break already. So in the weeks since our last live stream, no doubt, I have personally been trying to kind of research and put together a business model to try and take this stuff that what we've been working on into more practical reality kind of thing, and to make an actual like an organization out of it. Now,
Surprise.
we have, you could call what we've been doing an organization. We called it Portal Mountain so far. It consists of the model which we've been producing. We have that in various diagrams and documents, as well as the Telegram network. So this has come together as a sort of organization meant for kind of really informal development of the model. But thanks to the participation of everybody, who I will link in right now by, are we live? Yep, we're live, good. I'm just going to share that, share this meeting so that people can watch if they like to. But we've had the privilege and honor of serving with our friends at Portal Mountain to kind of develop this model, everything that we've been doing the last few years. We've had a place, we've had people, we've structured this Telegram network into a bunch of different rooms with different functions depending on coherence, temperament, all this stuff. So we've been developing the model.
Speaking of structure, I just want to mention that we're building on what's called a hyperstition. So this structure isn't necessarily what we would call real in its inception, but by its inception, it facilitates a reality of itself. In a sense that, like, if you have a plan and you execute that plan, you've now materialized your idea. They were in a hyperstitional sense before, and they become a reality because of their existence.
So the plan is like a hyperstition if it includes details of the model used, which are being instantiated
to facilitate the reality itself. Correct.
Right.
So in some sense, hyperstitions can be realized, but it's more of like a potential point rather than, and that's the kind of structure we're working with. It's a hyperstitional structure.
Right. And so over the years, we've been receiving, I guess, confirmations that this hyperstition is indeed working.
Because and it's being realized, yeah.
Because the model has been feeding off of this activity that we're doing with the model. This is like a classic feedback loop kind of thing. And we're kind of getting to the point where even in this this live stream format, which we've been going for over a year, or almost a year, over a year.
Yeah, this is the conversational operation.
We're coming up on a year now that we've been live streaming and talking about. We've been trying to cover the whole everything in conversation format as much as we can.
To touch on everything as we saw fit, yeah.
As much as we can. So we've got a lot of material that we need to, we were just talking about, at some point go back on and study and analyze and use as a kind of baseline for going forward. But going forward to what? What is the next step?
Mm-hmm.
And we are talking about, well, we've had products in the works, actual computer programs,
we've been
card games.
We've been toying with a lot of concepts, yeah.
Right. In a hyperstitional manner again. So we've had an idea, and we just keep developing and using our model to develop the idea.
In particular, we're trying to facilitate what we call a product is a concrete example that utilizes whatever that model that we've been discussing to facilitate the kind of outcomes that we have been pointing towards the entire time. Like obviously, this is captured in the dark in some sense, in that we're throwing a concrete object into the world and seeing what happens to it.
Yep.
So there's no delusion about that. It's more about putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak, in some sense. That there is an actual realizable element to our jargon and thought processes.
Right. So one way that I've sort of been looking at this recently as I've studied it, what we're doing, where we are at right now, where we're going, is that we have been bootstrapping an organization so far, which we call Portal Mountain. And
informally.
Yeah, it is very informal, and
I mean, it has no legal status. It's not an organization in the legal sense. It's an organization of individuals.
Right. So nothing in the legal sense, but also our own internal legalisms. There are no hard and fast rules. There's no structure that people are adhering to, although we kind of keep alluding to it and saying, oh yeah, we should be doing this or that. It's more like just kind of thought.
Well, it's a template.
Thought experiments.
It's more of like a template and like a mold that you may or may not fit with.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So we've, because we hold the model, and a few of us in the chat hold the model. We can see what's going on, and we can see the right way to do things and the problems that come up, but many people coming in and going or whatever, there's no structure that they're getting put into.
We're not special in that sense.
What I mean is that the idea in our head isn't being made explicit most of the time of what should or shouldn't be going on, and we just kind of let it all happen. And so this is what I've been calling Bootstrap 0. This is our first kind of iteration of some type of organization. What we're moving into is Bootstrap 1, which is going to be underpinned by an actual corporation, a partnership, which you and I are going to instantiate.
Yeah.
Right, and that comes with it a bunch of, I guess, expectations, but responsibilities and all that, and sort of a seal of approval, a stamp, if you will, from the state saying you are an actual organization, right?
Right.
And this is where
we want to go. Which is the shelter that we are trying to actually facilitate.
Be able to create organizations, corporations that shelter the guild from the world, sort of, that create that exterior shell which people understand and can interface with, but within is the guild.
Since it's been a while, let's just backtrack to
Run
shelter.
over. Go for it.
No, shelter being a natural concern, derived from the holarchy structure that we've been talking about, which has to do with being an organism within an environment, running a neurological operating system, or a neural operating system rather, and a social operating system facilitating feedback environment through self-similar entities. So that's kind of like the context, and shelter has to do with the fact that any organism is defined by its membrane of being separated from its environment in one way or another. So this could extend to the body, but it could also extend to an actual shelter built out from the environment as well. And so when we talk about shelter, we're not necessarily thinking about shielding ourselves from, doing illegal activities within the membrane of the guild. Like that's not the point.
Quite the opposite.
To build that shelter is to ensure that the legal activities of the outside world do not interfere in a way that can disrupt. Sorry, excuse me. Very itchy nose. Disrupt the very legitimate workings of the guild, based on things like not enough finances, not enough legal rights to this, to that, to the other.
Right.
So basically, the kind of interference that is often brought by perception of not interacting with the market properly. Right. So if we if that membrane is meant to distance the extreme demands of the market, the stressing demands of the market, from the actual activities facilitated in the guild by providing a barrier, a cushion, if you will, so that it's not the primary concern of the inner workings of the guild. There's an entire network of interaction covering that space.
Yeah, so
that's the trade guild in a nutshell, really.
Very quickly, just a point of perspective, I guess shelter is an acknowledgement of that which has to exist for something to be. So there are components to something for a thing to exist. There are many different factors that come into that. A shelter keeps track of those all in mind. A shelter for a specific holon or whatever
gives it in a specific environment,
has components. Every holon has components, right? We're getting into the holarchy here again. Yeah. So for a holon to be sheltered, that means that you're keeping track of all the constituent holons, quote unquote constituent, and taking care of that. That's what shelter is. Right.
So it's mostly for the purposes of just being explicit about the purposes.
So just to give an example that people would probably understand, you have a body with all kinds of organs and cells that needs food, it needs water, it needs all these things, yet you incorporate yourself in society, social context, to go to get a job and work. Now you have money, and now you're telling your body to go get food and all this kind of stuff. You're sheltering that which is otherwise helpless without.
Yeah, budgeting works as an abstract shelter,
right?
To facilitate those operations.
Yep.
With that, I'm going to repeat.
So, yeah, I'll probably let's just monologue for a bit there. We're only 15 minutes in, although I'm probably not too far behind you. Yeah, so we are kind of trying to transition, I guess you could say, from Bootstrap 0 to Bootstrap 1. What have we been doing in Bootstrap 0? I think primarily is production of the model. So we have like I said, diagrams, documents, and as well as in our own head, in our own understanding, how to describe and teach the model. I think this is mostly what we've been getting out of Bootstrap 0. Aside from that, good relationships, friends, community. We've got kind of a small pool of people together who are interested in the work. So this is very important when we want to move forward towards Bootstrap 1, that we have both a product, which is kind of the model, and a network to kind of get it out. And this kind of product we're working on, I haven't seen it as explicit as we're doing it. There are some other paradigms such as holacracy and sociocracy, which I'm just kind of looking into now, but they always seem to there seem to be missing pieces. So I'm just talking about what our product on the network is as the model, and that other organizations have tried to make systems such as holacracy and sociocracy, but they always seem to be missing the pieces. It never seems to be suspended in a strange loop. It always seems to be catering towards the corporate hierarchy anyways. It's like, how can we have...
I'll help categorize this
how can we have a life
even more explicitly?
How can we get our employees to interact with one another holistically, yet they're still chained to the chain of command?
Right.
That's what they're all about.
So I'll categorize this problem in a nutshell. It's a problem of exclusivity. All of these systems assume that participation in them has to be something that vouch in, like, you got to have representation before you have representation in the system, which means it's a system that is built initially on the premise of exclusion. It excludes people from the get-go, and then allows permissive stages to interact with it. So
you mean like climbing the corporate ladder?
Climbing the corporate ladder. So, but by definition, it is a scarce resource, right from the get-go. It is scarce. It has no capacity to actually address the problem.
So you're talking about
at all.
Just the way that we interact as people. Our default, let's say one person, two person in an environment, you interact. You start off by saying, "What is your authority even to interact with me?"
Right.
It's zero.
Right.
Zero now. But do you have any reason or authority to even interact with me?
You want a less formal example of this? You gotta earn my respect. Have you ever heard that before? Because I have. In that tone. In that tone. And what do you answer to that? Like, I don't fucking know this person. How? I don't work for him. I'm not earning shit.
Well, it's kind of a...
But that's my own...
It's kind of an obvious statement, too. That doesn't really mean anything.
Well, what does it mean to earn?
What it means
what
is that when somebody says that to you, it says, by default is zero. And
right,
then maybe there's
permission.
Something. So like you're saying, scarcity.
It's scarcity by definition. And this is the approach that causes all of these systems to go down the same route, without exception. And that's my it is only my assertion. Like, I'm not talking about a study that's been done or any of that stuff. So
no, it seems like a fruitful avenue.
But this is
so opposed to that is to assume. How do you assume openness?
Well, people exist, right? They're not excluded from space and time. So you got to start there.
So, starting there, that there is a body, a person in front of you who has...
And who are not me.
Who has ideas and feelings and all this.
Which are not mine.
Right.
And so on and so forth. This is the pattern of the problem is the inability to recognize that separate ideas do not need to conform to other ideas, especially one of oneself. Like none of these are actual requirements for sharing a space.
Let's take this into something concrete. The chat network and this idea we've been working on as a some sort of app that helps you connect to people. So
the way I would do this is immediately start comparing and contrasting it with existing technology. In particular, Telegram, that our viewers would be familiar with if they're all watching.
Probably, yeah.
So,
currently, yes.
So, first things to note about that application is that, for example, you cannot participate in a group chat unless you've joined it. Right? So, by definition, you have a barrier to, you have an exclusionary barrier. Moreover, there is a situation where you have quote-unquote moderators that sit on top of the chat with even more permissions, right? Notice how you begin excluded from that group, but there are certain individuals that are promoted there, and that's a matter of permanency too. It's their entire account. It has nothing to do with their activity until somebody else decides that their activity is no longer valid. Cue it, memory of you being banned, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I was thinking about that, which has nothing to do with coherence.
But it is an example of that dynamic.
Okay, and this also is a great juxtaposition, I guess, and I don't want to bash anybody, but like this is something that so we've been working for a long time with
SOTS.
Not on and off yet. SOTS as a community and just people we've known come and
From
go.
SOTS, yeah.
And there have been ideas commingling and all that kind of stuff. I'll just throw the name Anders out there, a good friend of ours who we have parallel projects almost kind of which just advance, but so Anders is also the owner of the SOTS lobby, but he could not manage that by coherence because it's not a thing. It's not a thing that's understood on his side of the spectrum.
It comes down to him having levers and controls that say you're in, you're out. That's what it comes down to. And that's, again, it's an exclusionary system.
He was forced to manage SOTS lobby as a popularity contest, basically. And so because of he wasn't really moderating or even paying attention to the lobby, but 2 out of 2 moderators other than me, so 2 out of 3, wanted me gone, right? Because they thought I was this or that, whatever they thought. And it was just like he throws his hands up in the air. He throws his hands up in the air and says, "Okay, well,
this is the case." Right.
2 out of 3 moderators said that you are bad. So okay, now you cannot exist, and you are ripped and torn from this community.
And to drive the point home, there is some merit to something like this. It's just not. It's not the whole merit of it. You know, like you can. This is not. It does not. It should not carry the kind of weight that it does in the ability to participate in spaces where you exist. Right? Now, obviously the internet is making that kind of question very arbitrary. What is a space, for example, is an arbitrary question at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But the denial of existence in a space is a categorical problem. Is a categorical mental the sound bite that it is, if you will, is a categorical social problem because it is divisive as divisive can get. It's a judgment call of you belong or you don't belong in some abstract goo.
Mm-hmm.
Fabricated by mental Mentalics. It's like it
Yeah.
becomes so
As
arbitrarily
what
fucked up.
what a group is and all this kind of stuff. What is it? So
And and the question of behavior has never even reached the platform. For example, like so, people accused of like yourself. You accused of what specifically? Being what? What was the word? Nazi.
Oh, that was like that's coming.
I've never seen this guy try to kill a Jew.
Yeah, we would find out very quick.
I would.
So like it was just
the worlds collide is what's happening.
Yeah, it was just friction was detected and that wasn't good, but
and the resolution was inhumane.
Right. So when there is friction, I'm sure there's got to be like therapeutic studies and like this kind of stuff, like therapy. When somebody acts out or causes friction willfully, it's hoping for a good resolution. Sometimes, like in deep down, you may be
there's
hoping
trolling.
for...
There's trolling.
There's
different variants. Sure.
There is bad faith trolling in which you're just trying to get a laugh out of it, which is hell no, not what I was up to.
Well, and that speaks to another point, is that spending time in exclusionary communities leads to a situation where there is no fundamental rapport built within that community. It becomes a house of cards in a sense, and an emotional roller coaster for any participant in it, because on the personal side, this is where your time is spent, and it is fundamentally real to you. And on the second front, it's just like this abstract thing that nobody actually is taking any kind of serious attention to. Like nobody is actually feeling the sense that there's people here together in a place. So that feeling is not there anymore, due to the exclusionary nature of the setup itself, and ultimately a broken loop. And that's the difference we're trying to introduce into not only technological element, but the social dynamic, is that the exclusionary model is fundamentally flawed.
Okay, so this exclusionary model, let's take this back to Portal Mountain, or Telegram network. You show up at the lobby, you're an asshole. All you're doing is spamming, you're gone. Right. So that's exclusion. But it was assumed that we could be the best of buds right off the bat. That's kind of what we're talking about?
That's the assumption, yeah.
Right.
Which lobby, sorry?
Well, Portal Mountain lobby.
Right, Portal Mountain.
And moreover...
So people have been banned from Portal Mountain lobby.
Hold on, of course, but... Also, people have showed up, and it's like right away you sense or detect a higher coherence, right?
Right. There's a few people that have done that.
Very quickly, they're already up into the next lobby and the next lobby.
Right. Where it's quieter and less people are involved in bickering and.
Right. So this is the kind of thing in intentional spaces which are well managed and are able to filter through coherence to create the best spaces for people. This is the kind of thing that we want to be able to spread into all of different networks.
So the exclusion in this case isn't happening to the person trying to participate in the system, but rather their effects on the system really reflect back into how much they can actually affect that system. Because if they're talking nonsense constantly, right, they're not going to be able to be heard by people who don't want to hear them, right? It's the selection is on the person doing the hearing rather than the person doing the talking. So the person doing the talking is left to talk, but the person who's responsible for what kind of information they want to hear is able to manage that. And this is the main departure, if you will, from the status quo. So also we have to bring in another point, maybe, is that with any kind of system that we're building, there would be that granular fine-grained control from the individual user's experience to say, I don't
I don't want to hear what they're saying off the bat. If it's unfiltered, I don't want to hear it. If it's part of a broadcast that other people are part of, fine, it'll be in there. But to be able to say, okay, this person, they're talking nonsense, and I don't want to hear any more of it.
Right. You're able to set that standard for yourself.
Yeah, and that the space.
And here's the thing, though. Hold on. Just before you go there, here's the thing, though. If you set that standard to yourself, and that person changes their tune,
right,
and actually starts talking sense, the channels you choose to be in, right, based on coherence and whatnot, you're gonna start hearing from them again because of their coherence.
So here's another factor to this framework, the dashboard mechanics or whatever. Of all the data, let's say conversations, broadcasts, whatever else is going over this network, from each their own perspective is built, right? So I can ban somebody from the lobby from my dashboard, and that means that it'll filter them out. But other people who are interacting with these same sets of artifacts, the same media, may not have done that already.
Right.
And there'd be very rare cases where somebody could arbitrarily at the top say, okay, you are not going to participate in any of these people's dashboards because they're all at the Portal Mountain lobby, right? This is as a like authoritative decision. That would be much less needed.
Right, exactly. It's completely unnecessary
If at all.
At that point.
Right.
Because what will wind up happening is that person will only have an audience with themselves.
Right. So like the example is somebody shows up to a shared medium and they're literally spamming go to this weird link. Right? That's the first thing they say is you're going to be rich, go to this link. It makes sense that you would be able to unilaterally say, okay, I'm pushing this ban onto all your dashboards, so now you've all banned this person, right? As a janitor of the space, right? This will be. I think it'll be possible.
I think this should be a message to everybody else to say, well, there might be a problem. Beware.
Right. So right away that message will be either hidden or flagged depending on your trust of who is flagging it. If you trust them even a little bit and they say it's spam link, then it's gone.
And in my mind, this is just me. In my mind, if used properly, almost everybody who stays in the lobby should progress to the campus at the very least. So if a newbie, if you will, spams the lobby, most people will already not see it because they're hanging out at the campus. Because they're not teaching. They're not like seeking to guide somebody, right? Which would be the primary reason to deep delve into the lobby and find people who are seeking something a bit more coherent. Right. So this is what you would do.
Yeah. Okay.
So everybody's hanging out in a completely different space than these spammers to begin with, and so they can spam all they want. Nobody sees that except completely new people who are then reached out to and say, okay, well, this is what's really happening here. Like, if you need you want to move away from this is where this is what we do.
Yeah.
It's almost like its own incentive. I would in fact allow this kind of spam just to incentivize progression into a coherent space rather than a participant one only.
Right. Yeah, so with this model that we've been producing.
By the way, overly spammed dashboards will themselves lose coherence and therefore will not show up as very well selected for whatever job they're supposed to do. If they're too spammed, they're not going to themselves be coherent, and so going to bubble down.
Yes. So the model we've been producing gives us this ability to augment chat apps in a way that's never, I don't think, been seen before.
Or thought of, yeah.
And this is kind of one of the main kind of cornerstones, I think, of guild networking is this ability to connect coherently and along lines of coherence, to be able to filter up what is more coherent. That doesn't exist anywhere. It's all just flat spaces. Whatever is shared, everybody sees it.
And it's all exclusionary based, so it's mostly about who do you exclude, not where in the coherence spectrum you are to post it to begin with.
Oh yeah. Do you want to take a break? Or go for a bit more? We're off schedule now. We have to go at the same time.
Let's go.
All right.
2 seconds.
Yeah, we'll be right back. This will be a quick one. Where are we at right now? 35 minutes in. Very good.
Nice.
Very good. Be right back. All right, and we is back.
Just putting shit away. So yeah, that's the gist of the difference, I guess.
Right. And so we're talking about guild networking here, and we're talking about the actual applications or products which we can provide, including the model itself, for proper guild networking. You could call this so many things, like, whatever, anything.
So that's talking about the bootstrap of the application itself.
We're talking about people who have...
I hate that board. I knew this was going to happen. Board? I was going to hit my head on that.
We'll talk about that later. That's a 1 inch and 3/8 by like 8 foot board.
Zoomy.
By it's like 8 or 9 inches wide.
And we're gonna make our cult symbols out of it.
Yes, we will. So let's say we're at nearing the final fireworks of the long process of commodification of all life.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are waking up to this. They're waking up to the problems that it causes, the Great Schism, the axial war,
And this is the
kind of stuff.
And this is the context in which they are waking up in.
So people are waking up into that, and what do you do? How do you network together? That's what we've been working on.
Scrolling through.
What is the commonalities that hold these ideas together? That's the model. And how do you communicate? These are the applications that we're talking about. Facilitation using either card type paper system, which we'll hopefully get into a little bit of that again, or applications which go far beyond what Telegram can do for you, as far as being able to hold space for coherence. So this thing that people have woken up to, how do you share that with others while kind of allowing the churning mass of noise to stay where it is and lift up these conversations in a coherent way?
Mm-hmm. It's a good summary.
To put it
Okay.
lightly.
And now, maybe let's get into the meat of the matter. I drew up a nice little rectangle on a piece of paper over here.
Sure. We're gonna just jump right into it.
Well, I mean, we've talked about so many untouchable ideas, if you will, in the sense of like you just got to think about them. But now we can give something to picture, to navigate, to touch, sort of, if you will, as in the format of a computer program, in a relatable way, from the perspective of we are already using these things.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much for literally everything, and to speak to our already existent propensity for scrolling through feeds and chats and these kinds of programs that already exist.
Right.
Because the first step into this program is that it looks like an augmentation of what is already out there, and that's the simplest way we can think of to acclimate existing people to something potentially radically different.
I'm wondering
there's not like in terms of computation theory and whatever, it's not that radical, but in terms of utilizing the tools that are at hand, it kind of might be. I'll lay off that claim until we know further.
Mm-hmm. Now I wonder if we've set this up as best as we could, because there is a bunch of context surrounding this. First off, so we're talking about dashboard mechanics here. Like that's the one
Dashboard thing being the program we're in question. It's the dashboard should be thought of as this computer program sitting out there in the world somewhere.
So, first off, a dashboard is a program running.
Yes.
So dashboards are online. That's what we say.
Right.
And this is kind of a perceptive thing to understand the onlineness of a program running. That means there are actual artifacts in suspension with strange loops that are actively utilizing that as a layer of understanding of reality, mapping hyperstitionally something over top of reality.
Right. Secondary thing to note, the word dashboard has been chosen as a metaphor for the fact that you only have a number of levers, so to speak, to actually touch and pick at and whatnot, that expand to the greater quote-unquote control of a reality. So in the same sense that in a car, when you're sitting there and you're turning your wheel, which turns the car's wheels, which changes its angular momentum and all of that shit. So it's like the idea is to qualify a limited set of controls over a wide range of function.
Mm-hmm.
That's the metaphor being used here. Hence, the metaphor became dashboard, as that was the main facilitator for this kind of stuff. If you do any kind of analytics, if you do any kind of logging, if you do any computational tracking of any sort, you need a dashboard.
Yeah.
another perspective for gamers, for example, like imagine the idea really materialized when I was playing SimCity, and how it gave a very limited set of controls in one sense to be able to facilitate the entire interaction. I mean, sure, it's just a simulation,
Right.
but the concept
Good
itself,
example. Yeah.
the concept itself of like utilizing this limited set of controls to manipulate a set of emergent properties, if you will, in a much wider range than you can imagine the controls themselves to actually facilitate. Like, it's not built into the controls. Like, what happens in Sims, again, to use the game analogy, what happens in SimCity isn't
Stays
built.
in SimCity.
It does no. It's not built into the controls that you have over the system. So you can place roads, you can place buildings, you can place that, but the success of the city is localized to the interaction of the pieces you've already laid down.
Mm-hmm.
You only have the control to lay them down and take them out, and that's it.
Right.
But the manifestation of that is
So
is what
this
we're
is,
discussing.
I think, a great point to kind of marinate on a little bit. Is like, what is a dashboard? And
So conceptually,
we're gonna
that's-
need. This is what we're talking about. We're gonna need that big time because, speaking of dashboard mechanics, we've been talking about the modes of operation. So that's another big part
right.
of this.
It's the ability to view that same dashboard in 4 different modes, 4
Modes of operation.
chosen based on other existent contexts, those being the modeled temperaments that we have. So this is really heavily tied into the model itself that we've been perpetuating as a concept. The modes of operation.
There's your 4.
The modes of operation are really a rough outline of how to take a medium and utilize it for a number of different purposes. The first one being the most direct, the most concrete, that's what we call a conversation. So in the moment, something is being said, something is being replied, it's happening in the context.
And this happens
everything is
everywhere. In
isolated.
nature, a pine cone falls from a tree. That's a communication over in the medium
Right.
between the tree and the ground. Something is there
Right,
now.
Right.
It happens everywhere. Conversation is everywhere in everything.
Action, reaction, action, reaction, action, reaction. So this is in the moment kind of stuff. The next phase would be to sort of abstract that and capture the whole sequence, if you will, of action, reaction, into a full-blown algorithm of sorts, a broadcast of information that this is the description of that. So a parallel, a mirror image
You could say
is extracted.
the pine cone fell, and that would be a broadcast which encompassed the fact of, say, the pine cone's root, whatever its root anchored, has broken, and now it's, according
the
to
story.
gravity,
This
it's
is the
fallen.
full story, so you can
It's
write
fallen
it out.
and it hit here and then bounced there, and now it's over here. You could say the pine cone fell. That would be the broadcast. The conversation itself is the tree let go of the pine cone, the ground accepted the pine cone, it bounced it off, and then it put it over here.
Right. Like individual messages to the components of that
To
conversation.
say the pine cone fell is kind of an arbitrary statement, but it collects together a
It's like the
story.
pine cone telling the tree that I'm now broken away from you, and that's the conversation it's having.
Right.
But the outside observer is treating everybody as an outsider for the purpose, and collecting the full picture into one abstract image. So this is the next phase. The next phase out of that is the details of of these kinds of images is like their properties. So is this belonging to this category? Does that belong to this category? Does this belong to this category? Like how do we manage that information?
Right. And it may be difficult to see here, but this is according to holonic organization.
Right, like we're not looking at something that's different. We're looking at something that's the same in different ways.
This this dashboard is what us living beings do. We create this type of apprehension of nature, but also you could say it's inherent to itself, which is a much more probably difficult thing to see, that there are abstractions built into that process of the pine cone falling. That's absolutely essential for the tree to reproduce. It knows that, quote unquote. That's part of its data. That's built into its overall evolution all through.
Why would it produce the pine cone otherwise?
Through millions of years, this is what's been carried forward.
Something is known about it.
Is that this is happening. That's much more tricky to kind of tease out, but the fact that we as conscious beings in a dashboard apprehend that this way.
In a sense.
Oh, yep. They're pausing there, yeah.
Yeah.
And there you get there.
Yeah, I got rudely interrupted
back into there then
by a not very rude person.
So I forget what exactly your point was, but we're again relating the holonic organization to this. It's not arbitrary that our dashboard is structured like this. That's what we're saying.
Right.
You can test it. You can see it. This is holonic organization.
Right. I was iterating through the assumptions being made. The assumptions being that a conversation is a broadcast. The messages inside the conversations are the content of a post, for example, in a forum, and things like that. Like we have a situation where things are not necessarily read as one thing only. So, for example, the fact that we are talking is a broadcast of information to other people to know the fact that we are talking, and then they can read into the content, and that would be the broadcast of the conversation itself, as it is happening right now and being recorded. So this recording is an example of taking a conversation and making a broadcast out of it. So the full post that you put on the forum is all the things that we've said, from beginning to the end, and then people can make commentary on everything that's been said so far.
Apologies.
Right, without interjecting. Look, after the fact is what I'm saying here. So that's like one way to look at how we're collecting this piece of data as a conversation, and then displaying it back as both a conversation, which you can watch going through it, or as a whole, beginning to end video, which you can comment after the fact.
So these are different views, if you will, that we wish to be able to use to navigate the dashboard.
Yeah. So what we're imagining here is a single medium, messages being sent across it, but the ways those messages are interpreted in different spheres of context are going to give it a meaning this way, a meaning that way, a meaning in a certain way.
Of course.
Corresponding to, this is, and this is the where the choice is not really arbitrary. Corresponding to the modes of operation based on temperament, in the sense that some people prefer to talk information out, some people prefer to read a big report, some people prefer to tinker with the data and see for themselves, some people prefer to tinker with the data in such a way that tells them more about the underlying processes with what they're tinkering with. So there's like all of these different ways to approach the problem. The final fourth mode of which is entirely meta, if you will, hence creating a kind of a superficial boundary to the exploration, because it starts to revert onto itself and creating an infinite regress situation, if you will. That's why it doesn't go beyond the certain points that it goes, that you create a situation of infinite regress. Narrative cannot necessarily be resolved beyond narrative, because meta narratives are still narratives, and so you're stuck in a loop. So you're not going beyond. The symbolic meaning stops making any sense. There's no correlation to anything useful. That's what I would paint it as. It's like a horizon. Like you can throw shit at it, sure, but what you get back is not informative.
So this just reminds me, I do have some charts here in paper form.
Oh,
I'm just quickly reminded.
I just wanted to hone in on this. Definition of a horizon is that you can try to keep going in that direction, but the problem is that you're going to be stuck in the same framework. And so, because it's like a Zeno's paradox, the arrow doesn't move because it has to cover half a distance, and before it covers half of that distance, it has to cover half that, and on regressing into infinity. So symbology doesn't allow to escape the horizon.
So, anyways, this dashboard that we've been talking about, Convo Broadcast Data Literature, we can see this line up with, if you want to take like the neural operating system layers, narrative object type meme.
Yep.
And you could from this say, okay, this is what the neural operating system presents as a conscious experience. These layers can be observed. Right? Observed in place. So
problem here is that narrative is actually beyond a horizon.
Okay, so I know we can say a dashed line there, but I was just trying to line it up here.
No, for sure.
Yes, we only see the objects. And it's an illusion that they come together in a fluid form.
Not only that, but interestingly enough, all the other modes, if you will, are bound up in the conversation. Because even if you're broadcasting something, you're speaking to somebody, right? So even that itself amounts to one message inside a conversation, even if it's a one message conversation. I'm just trying to illuminate how tightly bound the differences are, despite the fact of being different.
Yeah. So this is what it kind of reminded me of, that you're saying, the infinite regress, and is it just meta and meta? But you can say, okay, I just did this. I applied a model to see that there's a conversation happening in an environment where objects are being pushed here and there, whatever, out onto the environment. Some are broadcast, some are data, some are literature. That's going up or down in fundamental, whatever. You can then take that slice and say, okay, this is part of a function that's being produced by an organism, which is a stacked holarchy, and at some point it's creating these layers to be able to interpret itself, the holarchy itself, to be able to have content.
I can actually explain you better this time.
So, well, I was hoping to barely limp along the finish line, and then you could, maybe.
Well, there is the conversation that happens in the moment, right? Like what I say to you, what you say to me, blah blah blah, right? But then there is this ricocheting effect that happens because I said this in this conversation. A causality wave sprung out from me, like, to cause you to say this, to cause it to blah 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 blah, right? So
Those are like broadcast moments.
exactly. So despite the fact that it's just a conversation, there is a broadcast. I'm trying to speak to a higher layer here. There's a fundamental overreaching layer of like the consequence of the conversation, right? That's the broadcast. The consequence, the influences this conversation had on you, and the influences the conversation had on me, becomes a sort of like a state of the world, if you will. And that is the broadcast into the world, and therefore there's no difference between the conversation and the broadcast.
No.
And there's no difference between the meaning.
Of course, yeah.
Now let's get more abstract. Consequence can be now templated based on a particular scenario, right? The context of what is happening, the explanation behind of this reaction, this reaction, this reaction,
Right.
this reaction, this reaction. So
A
all
model
of the
for
different things that haven't been said, and now we have not only the full response for the conversation, but also the individual little mechanics that flow out from decisions being made, from blah 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 blah. This is all of the abstract things that we're talking about when we're capturing data.
Yes.
When we're taking and categorizing, this is that, this is that. So there's this entire system that sprung out as a result of this broadcast can now be captured into a static expression. That's another layer, right there. Those are the layers you're talking about. Look, all of this
And
now
now
is captured into a static
the literature
explanation.
itself is something more like the DNA, RNA of these organisms.
Well, what it's saying is that when you have that static situation, this happens. When you have that static situation, that happens. When you have this static situation, this rules that continue to change the system over and over and over perpetually.
Yes. So I was just thinking, like, back to the pine cone idea. Like, a broadcast part is like the snapping off of the pine cone. Finally, it snaps.
It happened, yeah.
It snaps when that last little bit breaks off. That's kind of an event. That's a broadcast.
But then you have a
situation. Nesting in the ground would be another broadcast, because now you've made contact with the ground, a pine cone seed ground.
Yeah, but all the rules that dictate when pine cones fall, this will be the broadcast. When pine cones separate from the tree, this will be the broadcast. All of these, this will be, is the next layer of reflection of, the capture. It's the unsaid part, the background of what is happening. So this
You're talking about data?
No, I'm talking about this pine cone takes on the properties of all pine cones when pine cones fall.
That's the data built into what it is, the pine cone.
Right. So it abstracts this pine cone away from all pine cones. So when you the broadcast is the specific pine cone, the data is about all pine cones. What happens to them when they fall? Right, and the final step in this abstraction situation is what happens to a pine cone when a pine cone falls. Like what rules are enacted? Because the static situation is saying...
And not only that, but what happens to make the pine cone even to let go? There are processes in the tree that are drawing out that node to the point where it can happen.
Right. So the distinction is that on the one side is like the pine cone is saying the pine cone is falling. Engage rules. On the flip side, it says, okay, when pine cones are falling, these are the rules. Gravity, blah blah blah. Fall at this speed. Fall at that speed. Whatever.
Kind of, yeah. Like
so there's a static placement and the motion to it, right? The situation and the engine that drives the situation into the next step, into the next moment, into So that's the final. Because this is the infinite regress, because when you're start to ask the question, well, how does this operate? You start to explain again, this data piece happened, and you're stuck in a loop. You're stuck in a strange loop again. Because you're saying, okay, well, these were the static situations that interwork this way. Well, why did they interwork this way? Because there's a static explanation saying they should interwork this way. Right? So a static explanation gives static things an ability to move from one moment to the next. Because this is a static explanation being read at that moment.
I'm kind
Processing this static situation based on that static rule set changes everything, which also potentially changes the rule set, because the static rule set is in the same domain as the static information being changed to begin with. Hence the loop, and hence the infinite regress. Because if you try to, how does that change? Well, look at the information of how it is. But how does that? So
kind of
it's
lost
bound
me
up.
there. And probably anybody watching maybe might have been lost off that. But
Give me a second, I'll be right back.
we're going to take a
I will make a computer analogy.
short break. Cool. All right, hit us with it.
So, on the surface, it seems like you have something and what you need to do with that something, because it is that thing, right? But stepping back, what we have is the something, which is a set of things, properties. Weight equals blah blah blah. Height equals blah, whatever it is, the something is a set of things. The opposite to it, what to do with it, winds up being also a set of things.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So in both cases, the description is static, but you have this special thing called what to do with it,
which is like the dashboard,
which is qualifying as more of an active element to it. So the description of what to do with it as a set of things arrives to us in two contexts. So the point being made is that what to do with it can change what the set of things is. But because how to change it is also a set of things, you can change what to do with it as a set of things in the very operation of doing something with it. And this
like
little
feedback.
Right. And this little loop where this is that creates a situation where you have an infinite regress in which you cannot pass this horizon, because every time you try to reframe it, you're doing it in the same framework. So you're never passing it or surpassing it or going anywhere outside of it.
Is that bad?
No, it's not bad. It's it's a property of the model we're talking about that needs to be understood, and why it's a horizon needs to be understood, because when you're trying to smash up against it, you're doing it in the horizon. You can never break out of it, because the set of things that you're doing something to, the way it's being done is measured by a set of things, and so on and so forth, and you're never outside of that loop.
And this is reminding me again of a difference between participation and membership, and the way that people will take a very static stance as to a very reifying stance.
You could say
to
this.
That,
you could
oh,
say
this
this
is that.
the
Oh, I
dynamic.
do this, and then that's that. So you have this mechanical view of things, but meanwhile, there's a whole sea of noise.
You can say that some kind of awareness, not necessarily explicit, but the awareness of this, that this set of things is also that set of things. The thing that changes is also a set of things that is being changed in the same thing. That jump in mentalic operations, if you will.
Right. Mentalica.
Yeah. is where
it's called Mentalica when you do that.
Yeah, is where membership really arises as a function. It's and here is why it's a function rather than a token. That without that mechanism in even if it's just intuitive rather than explicit, it's that mechanism that is necessary to understand where horizons are and what the model is really driving to, in that sense. So I just wanted to really hone in on that subject.
I'm just kind of on the vibe right now of mentioning that dashboards function that way, that they in themselves are to be updated constantly.
That's the consequence of the entire process for sure. They cannot stay static. Like, the code base that you get from the app itself is like it's a seed. It's not the tree. It's not the plant. It's just the seed.
Yep. Easy. All right. So, I'm not sure if we've given enough context to dashboards and the modes of operation, all that. It seems like it.
We can dive into the actual interface then.
Yeah, so I think so. So we've been now discussing dashboards. Dashboards come up whenever there's an agent. An agent uses a dashboard to cause things to happen on a medium.
An agent is a dashboard looking into itself.
Or sure, right.
Like in some sense, this is what we colloquially called a loopback.
Right. Okay. So that kind of simplifies things. But so the loopback dashboard uses other dashboards to do things. You could say.
It's the if you were to make an analogy to another app, your Loopback Dashboard is where you store your profile, your things about yourself. It's the thing that defines what we call membership. Like, being a user of the dashboard makes you the member of the guild at large. So
Mhm.
it's by definition
So
as far as that
let's
goes.
try to describe the Loopback Dashboard first. And this must include like fundamental functions, fundamental guild.
So it's a bare bones dashboard which basically says where do you want to receive your guild information from, which lets you pick and choose your quote unquote institute or institutes. Actually, like
Right.
it's not a one-to-one thing. So by connecting into that world at large, you're also facilitating the bare bones natural guilds, whatever those dashboard, whatever that network can provide, and the access to all the other members which participate in it, which facilitate the natural guilds to begin with, which provide a coherence score.
That you know of.
Right. So this is an exploratory element.
Right.
this
So
sense.
this is like if you set up an application but you haven't connected it to the network yet, it's going to look like you'll be able to see, okay, here's my conversations blank. Here's my broadcast blank.
You could almost
Here's
call
my
this a
data
multiplayer game. Like if you can get it, like a multiplayer game. Yeah, you can get it, but like if you're not connected to a network, you're not playing the game itself.
Right.
Like
And
it's a multiplayer situation.
And of note, even the single player mode is sort of a multiplayer.
In this, sure, you can opt to be your own natural guild stack, right? To take care of the
Right.
to take care of all of mediation concerns, but that's not.
This is kind of the situation we find ourselves in, though, a little bit, is that we're able to take this model and apply it to our own lives and accept that it doesn't expand unless other people are also using the model, applying to their lives, and they're willing to, through demand and supply economics and that kind of stuff, interface.
While at the same time, it can compensate for it to let you be the only sole whatever driver of your whole dashboard and never. Sure, you can do it solo. I don't see why. Like I don't see why you would use the app at that point. But even in that sense, it can be used. So you
Right.
can, you
It
can
should be.
virtually fill in every single gap into like your own mediation style and
Well,
your own.
I
And you can
think-
be your network for whatever.
I think it
guilds.
helps to start there, just to give an idea of what the archetype of this system is like.
I think what I'm trying to do here is explain very, very, very concretely that the model that we're trying to speak of and its opt-in whatever potential, if you will, is excessively free of coercion to the point of where it's unrecognizable in its marketing scheme. Like you, this is not a marketing gimmick. It's not a marketing ploy even. In any, it cannot be because of the what do you call it? The amount of exerted control you have over what you will or will not submit yourself to. Right. So there's no way to market that out. Is all I'm trying to point out, is that to market something like this as a gimmick sounds to me almost illogical. It sounds like it counteracts the marketing ploys in general.
So this makes sense that you would be able to use the dashboard on your own, but it's basically almost pointless.
Right. That's the idea.
Maybe for organizing your own life in some kind of sheltered view. Maybe you could use it to describe
The
more
one
organized.
use case I can advertise for is once you've gone through all of the motions and the waves and gone through all of the social aspects of the guild and done that, and you are confident and secure enough in whatever modeling you're doing, you can start to isolate yourself in that sense by reutilizing the social aspects of the dashboard into the personal ones. So if you do it after the fact, I mean, basically,
Yeah.
if you start to use it that way after the fact,
Sure, yeah.
it's far more useful.
Mm-hmm.
Far more useful.
Maybe let's skip.
But it requires a very, very strong awareness of what you're doing.
Let's skip this discussion of how to use the Loopback dashboard on its own, because it's basically kind of almost useless in that way. But it does sets up these modes of operation that we were talking about. It sets up that you're aware that conversations happen in environments, and you have different agents and different object types interacting and having a conversation with each other. No matter what job, task, thing you're doing, whatever guild, there's always an environment with certain types of objects and certain interactions and messages are happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from that broadcast come up there the kind of significant things which rope together a bunch of these conversation elements. And then above, on top of that, we have data which can be learned about those interactions and replicated elsewhere. So this is the power of guild networking, is that things come into data and you begin to describe things generically and in protocol form, and protocol works here, it works here too. This protocol is good.
Well, it's a matter of injecting evolution and natural selection right into the computational world. Because, again, the idea of coherence is really stating that, like, if things are vibrating in frequencies that don't belong in space, they can do that, and they can spend all their energy doing that, and not necessarily affecting the greater flow and the greater tide of things, which would self-assimilate.
A low power.
Right. Because we're relying on self-assimilation, and we're basically trying to inject a phenomena into a computational world in which this self-assimilation is happening on a principle that actually reflects nature.
And what do you mean by affecting the computational? Is this the
coherence? So because you don't have coherence in a space, right? You can spend all your energy trying to project whatever messages you're trying to insinuate into other people. But it doesn't project itself out of self-isolated bubbles.
And so to relate this back to our discussions on computation in the last number of live streams, this heavily depends on our model, our cosmos in which we're working with, and the different ways that we model things to each other. So you may speak even a different language entirely, but if I can learn to translate that, right? This is the computational realm.
Right. That's actually a great point for invoking what's called model speak. You don't need to speak the same language to be coherent. Because if you utilize whatever language you have to create model speak as its own little island on top, it doesn't matter if it's coming from English or it's coming from Russian or whatever. The messages are clear. That's the idea. There's no ambiguity in the symbolism. There's no ambiguity in the. It's just whatever term was chosen for that purpose, that's going to play that role in that language, this language, the other language. So long as the model is being kept coherent.
Yeah. So computation kind of implies a kind of higher abstract meta model that has some kind of influence on your little models and your interaction with your environment that you're doing. The computation kind of sits upon top of that and isomorphizes.
And that's the archetype of the machine to begin with. it sits there to be able to produce and consume the messages that are going out in terms of sound bites into a more abstract machinery that isn't present in nature but only in the abstract. So like a car, right? A car will not be created by nature. It needs planning and whatnot, and which come natural to from below, but self-assemble from the top. Like for instance, if you get a detail of a car wrong, you're not gonna have a car. So,
Right.
so the top-down restriction is very much prevalent there. So screen, we got screen 1.
Screen 1. Are we
Which
ready for screen 1?
Well, I think with all that garbage out of the way, we can begin to see how
It's a lot. It's a lot.
So when we dump our user into our app, what happens? Why this app, not other apps, and all that jazz? Okay, let's start from the basics: familiarity, acclamation.
This is going to be
just typical marketing.
It's going to be wild as shit.
Yeah,
man.
I don't think we're gonna finish this here.
We might. We could. All I'm thinking is like there are words that are going to come out that people will not understand.
Okay. Well, for for the purposes of this, we will need to get acquainted a little bit, I guess, with some software terminology, because this is kind of coming from software planning and so
Okay, so let's set the stage here a little bit. Let's say that.
So I can do that easily with a demonstration. This is the stage. We are in a situation where most people are very familiar with this. Going onto their device, and somebody mentioned me in a comment, whatever. But basically,
It's over there.
the Facebook feed.
The feed, or the Telegram feed.
The screen where the last message to come up is at the top. Anything before that second, and so on and so forth. Chat screens are actually the same thing, but the opposite. You have the latest message at the bottom. I think our screen is not the typical Facebook screen, which is, again, your newest at the top, but rather newest at the bottom, like a chat. So closer to the situation here, where I am giving shit to Brian for whatever posts he's making.
What is that? A chat?
Yeah, it's our chat. I'm just making fun of you as usual.
So I want to input like a kind of parallel scenarios here. One which we're going to dive into, which is a software based, in which this could be anywhere. It can be you can even be in a group all together, but you're sitting there on your phones, right? I want to juxtapose this with traditional facilitation, in which you have an organization having various...
Or just people in the same space and time. Like people being in one place. Forget organization. People you and me sitting on the couch.
Yes. Anytime you have a meeting in physical space, you have an opportunity for facilitation. And this is something we've been working on a lot with like the card game and like, paper and pencil type basics, right? So this is just kind of a parallel scenario that I want to say we're going to get into a little bit. But first we want to drive home the point of what it would look like on software, because we know that this is what most people are going to be utilizing say Bootstrap 2 or whatever.
So this is the starting point for most people.
Bootstrap
Not knowing
2
people,
or
but...
Bootstrap 3. in which we will have software available to hold groups together and interact with through dashboards.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make a side comment that this can be done on pen and paper. In fact, it must be able to be done on pen and paper.
Yeah, like in fact, one of the criteria I would say for the success of the software of the dashboard is its ability to mimic parallel other activities that do happen outside of software.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much built into the software's own criteria here, in that if we get this user interface conversation wrong, that will in fact affect the way we will proceed to extrapolate.
If what's wrong?
If some of our assumptions in the software become wrong,
Right.
then that means that the parallels in non-software world will also need to be adjusted to capture the model, because those are the restrictions. They are fundamentally restriction in that what's being done in software must be compatible with what can be done without any software.
And so I just want to take a look at, so with a Loopback Dashboard, when we're talking about within our own ability to see the world through the eyes of a dashboard, through this holonic structure.
What's the basic thing you see?
What's the difference between, say, a software and paper? And right off the bat, what comes to mind to me is conversations in software are recorded verbatim. The whole string of it. Mm-hmm. Conversations in real life, quote unquote, pen and paper, a lot of it goes.
Yeah, it's pick and choose.
You don't. There's no recording device often, although there could be. But often it's
no. If we're looking at conversation verbatim, there couldn't be. The only recording is here. Right. Not just the memory, but the interpretation of what's been said. So, not the words, but the meaning.
So these are two different scenarios which I think are great to juxtapose together, but we're going to focus on the software for a bit, and maybe with occasional, what would this look like in real life, quote unquote, paper and pen.
So first thing that jumps to mind from a technical perspective, right, is that when you record a conversation verbatim and you allow it to be a broadcast, you can then collect the side points and the differences in opinion and the differences in trajectories of the conversation in the commentary about elements of the conversation. So
commentary about the
like if you were to reanalyze it after the fact, how can you bring it back into a scenario where you're just reinterpreting what has been said? And that's by you have your verbatim record, but then you can get to go back to it and pick it apart and say, this means that, this means that, this means this means that in commentary.
Which oftentimes that's where you get the most fruit.
Right.
From that slowing down.
I'm not here trying to say it's got the same dynamic as a free-flowing conversation that you and I seem to have, where I can change an opinion based on, like what you immediately said, and that changes the entire course of the broadcast.
Sure, yeah.
But it does bring it back to the ability to do that after the fact with the meta-analysis that would flow on is as if it was a broadcast.
Just a side note, since we've been talking about this, our conversation is a complete flow, hour and a half now, but within that has been interjected broadcasts where either one of you or I would say, okay, let's talk about this now. That's kind of like a broadcast moment where the conversation pivots into a new area because you have that kind of broadcastness to the statement.
Which could also be used as pivot points inside of a broadcast of the full conversation as another tangent. So in this case, technology is not mimicking, but it's mimicking a representation of that. in the sense that, yeah, it still does verbatim recordings, so we cannot switch on the fly like this. But the comment about this can evolve into a comment about that, into a comment about this, into a comment about that, and although it's
Sure.
all verbatim recorded, there is an evolution. So the static becomes dynamic, if you will, because it like those events become representative of the past rather than the moment, right? So the next moment, sure, is a tapestry of the past in some sense, but it isn't the past; it's the next moment, and so this mimics that.
That I kind of gapped out on that. Not gonna lie, but maybe somebody got it.
Things are alive. Conversations are alive. Commentaries are living. So if
Important point.
so if you reanalyze a point,
Yes,
right?
and that is a
and
great
you
point.
and you, for example,
It's a great
you
point.
said something in a conversation. Somebody looked at the overall conversation and said, "Wait a minute, what you said here does not make sense." You come back to it, you reanalyze your own words back in the conversation, you reply to this person in a comment saying, "Oh, you were correct on points A and B. This is the next step to resolve this point." So, yeah, we have a static recording of mistake happening.
And something living shooting off of it like a mushroom.
Exactly, which is itself grounds for maybe one more conversation, maybe another extrapolation,
right.
maybe another
And
post.
that's the online alive part, is that happening.
So the static becomes not so static as much as a representative of another agency from the past, if you will. It can't. In I don't think I've ever framed this before, but in this sense, that becomes another dashboard to work from. Does that mean an explicit dashboard in software? Probably not. But mentally, here you go. How would your parallel mental dashboard would operate? This is where it would evolve
If
and
it's
continue.
dashboards-
Software can only do so much.
If it's dashboards all the way down.
Yeah, software can only do so much.
yes.
So we got to realize that what a dashboard is doing is it's doing a what is it called? It externalizes the memory. So dashboard plays into that.
Morphs.
So we have to accept that fact.
It morphs and changes based on our inputs.
Yeah.
It should be a living seen as
what
a
we
living
need
thing.
to do, yeah, exactly. What we need to do is make it, instead of a dead rock that just speaks back to us,
So
into a
dashboards-
living creature that speaks back to us.
Dashboards are alive. Or they're online. We say they're online. That would
Online,
be a
pseudo living. Pseudo life.
Pseudo living. Cool. Okay, we're back. We is back.
It's a bar. So
I was thinking of some context and whatnot. Maybe we'll just take a moment to chill over.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, that's what I was thinking about. Remember when when there was something...
I knew this was gonna happen.
Damn it. Remember when I put something back here? I put something here before and you smashed your head on it?
Not like this. Ow.
Okay, well this is maybe a good time to introduce. Fine. Well, we'll move it. We'll introduce it though.
Can you remove it after?
So, you remember, some people may remember the Portal Mountain artifacts that were made from a special wood called Akoya. It's actually called that because it's treated specially in how the Dutch do it for their locking systems, whatever, their channels for wood underwater. So it has to last for a long time. Anyways, the Portal Mountain artifacts were created out of that, and I've found a new slice of wood which is going to
be gifted.
Gifted to our organization for Bootstrap 1. So those were Bootstrap 0 artifacts. Bootstrap 1, this is going to have something to do with the organization itself, and I'm not sure how they're going to be awarded or used to recognize.
I think formality is going to start playing a role here.
Used to recognize people or whatever. But so this is a very special piece of wood, which probably, I don't know if you'll be able to see what makes it special. It's a curly maple, so you should be able to see like waves on the wood itself. But anyways, it's a long piece. We'll just get her in shot there. Yep, and front and back. inch and 3/8 thick, and I'm gonna use this to mill out certificates, basically, when accomplishments or whatever.
Membership tokens.
Something like that, right? Yeah. So.
All right, can we please move it so that I don't bang my head off of it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if you can see the curliness. Yeah, there you can see it on the camera. It's like stripes, like a tiger striping kind of weirdness to it. It's like a holographic waves on the wood. Very special, and this is actually also...
special.
This is a wormy maple as well. You can see here a worm has come through, causing this discoloration, etc. So I'll put that away so Janio doesn't kill himself.
Yeah, I'm incompetent. I need my headspace.
But I wanted it to be there so that, we could, since we are talking about formalizing Bootstrap 0 and using that as a plateau onto which Bootstrap 1 exists. The plateau being the production of the model and our little network, and now something bigger can come on top of that.
So it might actually sound like a completely the complete departure from what we've been saying about exclusionary systems. just to make a note of it, Brian, how would you explain to the good people there how it's not part of the same project of exclusion?
Well, first off, we are looking for anybody and anyone who is willing to participate in what we're doing. So we assume anybody who we know who interacts with us. We want you to get with our lingo, with our network, by default. So that's the default state. It's not that you're pushed out or anything.
Okay, but that doesn't exclude us from like the typical cult. I'm just running through the.
Okay.
I'm just running through the actual.
Here's the other part. The other part is that these artifacts would be awarded not to signify by arbitrary authority, a certain distinction, but that something has been recognized as having happened in the past. So it's not like a key that opens a door for something. It's like a recognition of something of the past that has happened. It's like like a thank you.
Let me help you out a little bit.
Go ahead. Go right ahead.
Anybody who's ever gotten the artifact wanted one. Speak to that. The only people that have the previous artifacts,
Yeah.
they wanted one. They explicitly put one on order to you, right? They gave you an address to send it to.
Right.
So
Why
did that happen?
That's by having made it to the academy. And how did they make it to the academy?
But my point is that it's not the kind of token that like you work your ass.
Okay.
It's not like you're passing a test to
And then you
receive a token to say of recognition to say you've passed a test, right? That never happens. I'm trying to point to a different dynamic. Like an entirely different dynamic as to like nobody obtained this artifact by saying, I know this stuff.
Right.
I passed the test.
We are juxtaposing against a typical certification authority.
Right.
Which gives, if we authorize that you have this certificate,
Knowledge,
that means that you can gain entry into this place that requires that. That never happens. Because in context, a place that requires that, they can't assume by having this artifact that you know the guild.
You could have paid for it. You could pay somebody else to do your certification.
Or you could just be pissed off and disgruntled, and now you're in a depressed mode, and you're not the same exact. Everything isn't the same in your life as it was. Not that I'm just giving an example. The way that this has to be taken by people, if you see somebody with one of these artifacts, is wow, they did some cool shit. It doesn't mean they are authorized and certified within the network to do this or that. Although
they might have actually accomplished something to that effect.
Although that's kind of the point of these things, that we keep track of who we've given them to.
Well, my point was about the request part is that it's not a matter of a certification in the traditional sense. This is something that is based on quality rather than quantity. In particular, quality in this, the distinction I'm making,
coherence.
In particular, is the ability to maintain a certain level of essentially like playing with the band or whatever. A situation
you have achieved that
a situation which is a qualitatively recognized feature of oneself, and once a person actually feels the quality in agreement in an unspoken way, it has to be an unspoken way in the same sense that a taste is unspoken. For if I give you a watermelon, right, I can talk about how it tastes all day long behind the screen, and if you've never tasted one, you don't know what it tastes like. That's the unifying inability of quality to be transferred with words, but only through metaphor.
This is why the web of trust is important, because
our web of trust is not quantitative, it's qualitative.
Right. And the coherence is kind of a thing that you can say.
It's a quality you carry with you.
When somebody, let's say, achieves membership or whatever, and they have the cosmological shift and their life kind of changes, and they get a new perspective on it. This happens. This is a thing that happens. As an outside observer of somebody who has already been through that, you can see for sure, okay, they're not behaving like the normal machine-like apprehension of reality. They're taking a much more nuanced, like you see the nuance, and the weird thing is, it's not like they did anything, it's that they stop breaking the constraints of the past. So this is kind of a weird thing. And
it's not an action. It's actually almost an inaction.
It's a
in some sense.
You stop doing certain things. That's the weird part. So you can never really say what it is that was done. But either way, this membership can be recognized in other people, and that's when you're out of the lobby. Come on, let's go into the
Right. It's the communication. Interaction itself that sets up the properties that we're talking about. It's not the level of the person interacting, but rather what is coming into the interaction that defines the context of that person in the interaction, and which
how
which literally means that there's no stability to a personality or an exception of like an identity of a person that becomes entirely transient, if you will. The connectivity winds up being in the acts themselves, and without any regard to the actor, if you will. Again, all of this is the subtle outflow of this kind of...
It won't be able to be described.
Right. Well, there's been attempts, right? Like in the Buddhism, it's the non-selfness of all things. But again, those are ontological positions.
Non-conceit, as we would say.
Conceit is a calculation. Right, so non-conceit means the lack of calculatory elements about self-referential positions.
Right, and you can observe that in somebody.
And the materializations of which wind up being ego and the rest of the dysmorphic side of the modeling.
And some people through life can make a big change, and you notice suddenly they're not doing that. This one, some special thing they're not doing anymore.
Right. Which is usually drowned out by people's opinions of their past. But.
Of course. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So
that's the fun part.
This is really great discussion right now, because what we are talking about is guild networking, and what are we bringing to the network? What is our product that we are bringing to the table of say activists and different groups who do this and that, but they're all not. Nobody's united. They don't know how to properly filter for coherence, and things easily get swept away in the ego stuff, and before you know it, 2 out of 3 mods want you gone, and you're gone, and all this kind of stuff, and it has nothing to do with coherence.
Every time you start hitting up against the ego, it's more about calculatory systems that manipulate a matrix of information, and if that doesn't sound alien to you, that's a problem. Because it is supposed to sound excessively alien, but at the same time, that's the natural activity that results out of
and yet there's something special behind that alien description, which is a living process.
It's what recognizes it.
A living process that recognizes it and allows it to morph.
Right. The ability to even label it as an alien function to begin with is the self-referential awareness that is required for the unraveling, if you will, of the informational network. The informational network we were looking at as a pinball machine, a thing that sort of directs your trajectories in life throughout your life. And the opposite of that, if you will, as a suggestion, is being to become untethered from the pushes and pulls of that machine and becoming leaving the game space altogether, not allowing the machine to dictate trajectories in any sense.
Glad you didn't crack your head open on that piece of wood. I remember the last time we left something there. I can't remember it, but you smacked your head on it. This time you even knew you were going to do it, and then you did it. Yep.
Isomorphism lacking.
Yep. So
Alright,
that piece of wood and the ability to certify and all this kind of stuff brings up the certification authority, the certification body, sort of
Which
thing.
is the false way to look at it. Ish.
Okay,
Ish.
explain. Yep. We are trying to do something like that.
We are
but
an authority, for example, in the sense that we might not.
it's
be,
in the context is a peer-to-peer web of trust. That's the context.
Right.
Everybody is literally a certification authority.
So in a sense, then, if such an artifact does not make it into your hands, what does that mean? Right? Like if you,
Nothing necessarily.
Nothing necessarily. It just means that you and I, or somebody in this position, we don't understand each other. You could be very well in the position of receiving one, but we're limited in capacity.
Well, first off,
limited in capacity.
I only
to
have that one
assert.
board. Not
For
everybody
one, yeah.
can get one. Right.
For one, yeah. For two, let's use. I don't even know what it goes by now, but formerly known as RK.
Okay. And I suspect we were talking about him earlier as well. Him, her, it's, them, they, whatever.
No, that would be Eris.
Okay. Could have been. Yeah, just people who talk about they'll join a room and
RK
anime
has
comes
shown,
up, anime
has shown
images and then
RK,
random stuff.
and I apologize for whatever name is. It's a matter of my bad memory and inability to follow
Yep.
the happenings.
All much love to everybody.
Yeah, this is just a reference. It's not an
Okay, spit it out.
identity. The point being is that I feel like this individual is capable of membership and expressing it, and being able to cope and relate information in such a way that there is a sense of coherence and everything to do with that. But I also know that historically they've never tried to actually participate in that flow. They've always tried to divert it to another flow.
Mm-hmm.
And so that those have been traditional grounds of please stop fucking with this. And how you could say be quote unquote denied an artifact of such nature,
Or
and,
even denied the ability to stay in a chat room.
right,
Kicked out.
right. It was never about the person. The identity of the person carries this connotation, but rather historical tendencies that have prevented further motion in one
Right.
particular direction that needed to be.
Especially so this is
So is it an exclusive?
there's a history of offering participation. This is how you participate.
It's a speak
and
to exclusivity.
Something completely random happening instead of engagement with what's been offered.
It's to speak to exclusivity and to make the point that this individual has actually been welcomed back into the channel on many occasions. Many attempts were made to facilitate the actual interaction, and it has never gone in the
Even
direction that is not disturbing.
Bending over backwards to accommodate whatever could be mental health stuff or whatever. It just becomes a complete
or differences,
riot.
or just forget mental health, just differences. To speak to the differences, but the inability to actually connect with the rest, which has been the key point for all of us, connecting and reconnecting and reconnecting Why do we have persistent members versus just silent participants?
Mm-hmm.
Because they connect. They take the time to not only express themselves,
Thank you.
but to ingest what is being expressed by others. That is the connection that we facilitate.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody who has been ever banned,
that is a connection. That's connecting in general too.
Has basically violated the one principle of being able to share the medium for the back and forth element. So
Mm-hmm.
the people that have been essentially rejected have entered the room, yelled at everyone,
Which is very few and far between. Eris,
and everybody had the reaction of "go away." And
Mhm.
that's the situation they faced.
And maybe that's what they wanted, was to just they had to be rejected. or
No,
whatever.
what they wanted
Subconsciously reliving their trauma of being rejected by society to prove.
Sure.
And
there
maybe
might
we
be,
could have super accommodated them and coddled and all this. But how do you have the space?
Sure,
for that?
but the real deal there is to prove to themselves that every single social function functions on the principle of exclusion by experimenting with that, by doing things
causing it.
that
Yeah.
will definitely
That's what
get
I mean
you rejected.
by the trauma response, basically.
And so, sure, you're feeding yourself truthisms, truthy stuff.
Truthiness.
You're feeding yourself a kind of truthiness, but you're just escalating a situation
Trauma
that is
is
actually
tough.
far more dynamic than a set of
Trauma
rules.
is tough because that kind of
It's
that should
it's a growth of an organism.
and we've tried to reach out.
Trauma is
and
an organism.
There's an ongoing reach out to Eris. If you're listening,
Eris,
love you, buddy.
Eris.
All that kind of stuff.
Here's what I will say about Eris. Eris has, at the very least, got the message that we are not the kind of group of people that deserves unscrutinized bastardization.
Think so?
What I mean by that is that he joined Sot's channel recently, tried to really have it out with me
Oh,
for no reason.
the lobby? I wouldn't know because I'm banned.
Yeah. He tried to.
I get
he
to
tried
miss out on all that.
He tried to duke it out on me. And
they got banned, didn't
when
they?
I
Because yes, you're right.
not
right.
this time. When I pointed out to him that you're about to get the boot if you don't stop this kind of rhetoric with me, like I didn't do anything.
Mhm.
I literally done nothing at that point.
You are quite masterous at that type of approach. Yeah.
And so he got the message basically, it's like, if you don't shut the fuck up about this now, you're not going to continue talking about any of this at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so that at least gave pause to
This-
whatever animosity there was.
This makes me think about like talking about Dashboard and our app that we were talking about. When you join a chat room and cause a big stink, and let's say like 50% of people kind of ban you, quote unquote, from their perspective, they ban you out of their signals, they filter you out. Then let's say there's some that stand back and still keep engaging in the medium. And then it turns out that, okay, things are okay. And then there's a process of a reconciliation with
Right.
those who have banned you, and a trust that has to come probably not from that person who caused the shit, but from the people who stayed back and helped this person up into coherence. And the trust can filter back so that you become heard by the group again.
Right. What does this avoid? Shunning.
Yeah, we don't have that function in any of our social media, so we are definitely looking to
in this
upgrade.
particular dashboard is actually a way to mitigate the capacity for shunning, in that yeah, sure, an individual voice may be harmful, wrong, whatever category you might want to place it at.
Yep.
It doesn't give it the kind of ranking that is static throughout the universe and says this is a bad person. It's not like it's like a credit score,
Right.
basically. This is a bad person. We ain't gonna ever work with him. Like, if we were to create the situation of software to be like that, we would have changed nothing at all, and it would have not even been worthwhile conversation. To be honest, that's the very problem that
Well,
it's meant to solve.
Right. So,
Shine.
but instead of a centralized credit score, quote unquote, social credit, it's a individual
yeah.
peer-to-peer web of trust credit score,
Where are you? Which dashboards are you on?
which is very.
Where are you?
This type of peer-to-peer web of trust credit score is very vulnerable to low coherence, in which you could just drop a coherence bomb, and because people don't like it, suddenly you're shut out, right? But there may be one or two that can recognize it, and before long that bubbles up, and it realizes the story is told in the medium that this was actually a coherence bomb or whatever,
Right.
and it makes sense because of this, and this person is cool actually, or
And
whatever.
this is actually the reasoning behind why you would be having this coherence on one dashboard, so different coherence on another dashboard, and so on and so forth. In that you might be shunned in one sphere of coherence based on whatever
Right.
self-replicating feedback that
It's
they're creating.
noise, complete noise at some
Right.
levels. Yeah.
And yes, we are completely aware that these dashboards will be used to recreate the same fucking noise that happens in the real world, as they are an attempt to reflect occurrences in the real world to begin with. So entropy is going to be supreme in this.
We have to embrace it completely.
What the idea is to facilitate a way to look at that noise and trickle down the patterns that are actually coherent within the noise,
Trinkle.
and filter and trickle and whatever condense,
Trickle down.
trickle down, trickle down. Whoever's pissing on somebody else.
I made a note.
But the point being is that individual coherence is never going to necessarily express the full coherence.
So I just want to point out.
And quantum tunneling is going to happen.
I want to point out.
That's a metaphor, by the way, to anybody who's triggered by any, what do you call it? Literal interpretation. That was a metaphor.
I wanted to point out something, but I've forgotten it now because it took you so long to say that. Anyways, we can just reconvene.
Yeah.
Yep.
So screen. The first screen. Conversation.
Yeah. So I wanted to point at the fact that virtually all of our media, all of our social media, is tainted by the plateaus of commodification. It's part of that. It's part and parcel of that. It does not take account to anything that we are talking about. Basically, all of our media is tainted this way in such a way that you can see that.
Yeah, this
in
is
Telegram, for example, everybody sees the chat log. Everybody has the exact same view. This necessitates administration having to come in and say, okay, you're a spammer, you're this, you're we don't like that thing talked about here, we don't like that thing talked about. So from top down, one group of people has to say,
it breaks physics.
this is the official thing.
And this breaks physics.
That's every single
Relativity
social media. We are doing something different, fundamentally different, and that is what is going to bring together the guild when it has its proper media to allow us.
When you
to
say
network.
fundamentally different, are you referring to the exclusion versus inclusion dynamic?
Probably. That seemed fundamental. But
I
fundamentally,
believe it is.
another way of saying this is data-centric, agent-centric, like how Holochain does. It's the same discussion, basically. Web of trust versus this is the authority trust. It's a whole different beast.
I'm going to reserve my opinion on the holochain because on the holochain perspective, you can break away with your truth, and this points to a fundamental problem. Fundamental problem.
We do have issues with them.
Is that these kinds of databases, in reality, are built on the fly. You will reassemble the data necessary to construct the database in the moment.
Right.
So it has to be part of a contextual interaction.
And Holochain typically doesn't go that far.
So what a data it cannot tell you what a database is based on this interaction versus that interaction. So if this interaction is supposed to create this database of knowledge, and that interaction is supposed to create that database of knowledge, it has no capacity whatsoever to know what the distinction might be. So it has no context. It is falling into the same problem of being decontextualized, detached, and so this is why my argument is that these databases have to happen in the moment, reassembled each moment. I'm not saying this is technologically feasible. This is a different problem to solve, technologically speaking.
Though along the lines of Holochain, they've got a great start on this.
Right. They have
a beautiful framework.
The initial starting point is there, but they've never elaborated upon it to facilitate the transient element.
And my kind of take on that, and I think we've expounded on it before a little bit, is that Holochain, in that they may have the synthetic neural computation, but they don't have the sentient
element.
Right. And that's what we kind of can provide, but it's almost like, do they know about it? They don't know about it. They do. They don't. Maybe we need to get together.
The problem that we have with this in particular is that sentient computation does not necessarily live in the electronic sense either. It's
right.
Also mental
and
framework.
So this is what we are providing, in a way, is the mental framework, and that's why I tried to push on that earlier a bit. The mental dashboard and all this kind of stuff. The dashboard exists in your head first as a local whatever, to be able to see the patterns, and then outwards, that's where you're applying it. There has to be an internal thing. You can't just rely on a computer program to do everything.
And by an internal
the loop
pattern,
must be maintained.
The internal pattern, again, is the metaphor that there are a limited number of switches, gears, and things and buttons you can press to actually affect things, but the combinatory outcome of the effects you put into place have an emergent property in that they build something outside of the things you've placed there. Right? This thing works in this limited capacity. This thing's work in a limited capacity here.
Yes.
This thing works in a limited capacity here. But the combination of all of these limitations and capacities creates this new and totally brand new thing that has these capacities and these limitations that have nothing to do with the original dashboard you're talking about.
And you could apprehend that and make a new dashboard for it.
And this becomes the next dashboard, of course.
Yeah.
That's the fractal. That's the growth element. That's the nature recombinatory facet of it.
Yeah.
Where we come back to DNA and trying to grow as a living thing.
Well, I'm glad that we're only halfway through our time limit of, let's say, 4 hours. We're going to take yet another break. Be right back. Back. Guess who's back?
You know what's funny?
What is funny?
I think we're touching about the fundamental basis of free speech.
Okay.
Not the not the constitutional kind, but conceptual. In particular, if this dashboard works the way it does, we have a situation in which a person, if they have something to say, they have no limitation on that capacity, right? They can throw all of that. If it happens to be sewage,
it still is there for anybody to see potentially.
Right? They're not blocked in any sense. So
what about hate speech and dangerous
sewage?
Dangerous.
Yelling fire at fire at the
we have to
movie theater.
Acknowledge.
This is that. This
cries for help and all kinds of. Even though people are not crying for help, but they're saying shit that's really fucked up, and that
the boy who cried,
they need some help.
The boy who cried wolf mythology acts really, really, really well to explain what we're doing in how to cope with the situation. In that, people who decide time after time to expel sewage out of their verbal mechanisms, right? Like everything that comes out of it is constantly a sewer. Shit. For lack of a better description, it's shit.
Well, and it's better if that gets addressed. Like, if it's...
They have a very limited capacity to expel it, right? Because it winds up going to a drain.
Well, that's why we have the sewage system, right? But you can
much
still
like you still
watch sewage going down the drain.
Much like you still have shit in your body, but you still end up expelling it after the fact anyway.
Of course.
Right? Like whatever system you have to deal with it is going to expel it right outside of the fact. This is what I'm talking about in regards to free speech. Our approach to free speech has nothing to do with overreaching, alienating injunction of this is politically incorrect, or should not be said this way or that way or the other. Well, it's the other way around. It's the bottom.
From the bottom.
It's the bottom up effect of like, if what you're producing is absolute garbage, it's just going to go.
You're going to notice
trash.
that in your peers, and their receptivity decreases over time, and that sucks.
Again.
And you'll want to increase coherence.
Utilizing the natural flow.
Maybe, I don't know, just a little thing.
It's all about utilizing this natural flow. And so our idea of free speech, for example, is like, yeah, talk all the way to your fucking Nazist ideas, whatever. Try to convince everybody to kill everybody. If they are all in the same state of awareness with regard to everything else, that message is not going to go anywhere. When they're disconnected and their own little thought bubbles, that message will work wherever it will work.
This reminds me of the typical space management and administration of, okay, well, we can't have those messages in our space.
That's not how that will work.
Right.
It can never work that way. It can only work on the resilience of the hearer.
And so
the hearer is the controller, not the speaker.
This is the critical, ultimate, insanely important point, is that there is a responsibility built into who is hearing on the network.
Response ability. The ability to respond is with the hearer.
From the bottom up. That's how a bottom up happens. It's not someone saying, okay, this isn't allowed here, this isn't allowed. It's that
the responsibility
each has
is
their
not
own reflection of, okay, a message has come on the medium. Each one has their own interpretation of that. That's a responsibility.
I'm interrupting you to just like make it so jarring. Think about this. The responsibility placed on the speaker to stop speaking. What? Response ability on the speaker.
Right speech.
Speaker is the thing to respond to. Responsibility, the ability to respond, cannot lie with the speaker, because lies in the response. So not only is this a mental conflict, it's a conflict in terminology in itself that is being completely overlooked.
Yeah. So without digging up too much society and all that, people need to undo the plateaus of commodification, all this kind of shit. That becomes complicated.
You can't undo. You can only add,
deal with,
and recycle, if you will, what we have. We can't get rid of what we have.
Well, what I mean by undo is, as a responsibility, is that take back something which has been exported out into the ether, it's of society, back into yourself, and that's...
Let me illuminate a thought I had when I said this. The body, for example, never responds with a lack. What the body does is, for example, to stop a process, what it will do is it will create process stoppers. Now, instead of stopping a process, another process happens that simply has the effect of stopping a process. So, to stop a process, you start a process. Get it? Like there's that conundrum in biology, in that to stop something from expressing a gene, what it needs to do is to create a lot of stoppers which are created by the same process.
This comes back to the dashboard, I think, apprehension, in which Some process may be happening on the medium. All you have is your dashboard to work through. So you can start this process, that process. This is your
Right.
dashboard interface to a thing. You're seeing certain signals. Now you want a stop signal. That's your dashboard gives you this.
So
You don't have access directly to that process that's going on.
yeah,
You have your dashboard access.
you have your dashboard access, and you have an ability to say manipulate the negative feedback for that process. That's the
To
key.
add
That's the key.
negativity.
Processes stop by adding a negative process. That was the key element to derive from all of it. This is how genetics works, as far as I know. I could be, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But as far
I'm
as
not gonna argue.
as far as we know, like the way a particular gene sequence stops being very, very effective is by generating so much of itself to the point of where those elements that it has generated feedback into the system to tell it we have enough, and therefore the expression of more tells the
Right.
system to do less. So it's a negative
Yeah, and
feedback
it
loop.
could be a runaway like a cancer in which there are defenses,
Cancer is a positive feedback loop. What
Right.
I'm talking about would be a negative
Yeah.
feedback loop.
but negative feedback in response to a positive.
Exactly. So the more you create something, the more it inhibits whatever it is you're creating. That's the biological response to cessation. It's not to stop something. It's to generate something that counteracts it. And
It's fine.
the point, really, the fundamental point is that none of these processes are eliminative. They're all generative. All of them. They're to generate more and more and more. And so because you're generating more, you got to be aware of that. And the awareness is what is allowing for what's generated to be negative feedback or positive feedback to whatever it is that's being generated. That's the
Dashboards
long
upon
one.
dashboards.
That's the long-winded explanation of all this causal feedback.
So, very interesting. I wonder if we've given enough context to kind of try to jump into some basics of the app. Let's just sit here for a sec. Do we have the context here?
We have enough context to say, hey, when you drop into the app, you've basically dropped yourself into a potential Telegram group. Let's start there. Everybody who is on the app has experience with Portal Mountain on Telegram.
This is the app as it has been constructed so far.
Conceived, yeah.
Right.
Constructed is a strong
Right.
word.
Yeah, we can talk about it. We can speak about Portal
Excuse
Mountain
me.
itself as if it is this constructed app that we're talking about.
So, Portal Mountain
Yep.
is a mental construction.
And what is it? God knows how, but you've got the link and you join the lobby. Now what happens?
Exactly. So we start the premise of the app starts with the same premise. It's like you somehow manage to get yourself involved in this lobby. You've got a link to connect with this program, whatever.
Yep.
The next step is your self-interest, of course. It's a voluntary process. And you decide it's worthwhile investigating and whatnot. And you're dropped into a scenario where you have people of the similar opinion, this is worthwhile. And you're dropped into this potential lobby. The lobby, right off the bat, does not necessarily involve anybody else. You create who you are. You're talking to yourself at this point. You
make your profile.
This is your profile making.
You get to put a
stage,
picture and your name and a bio.
which is more like an abstract representation
Say
of some sort of agency within
200
that
characters.
system.
Okay, yep.
Something recognizable within that system that can be act as an agency and provide you with feedback on your end. So now you've established that you are communicating by these particular quote unquote protocols. And the next phase would be to join something that is consistent with this, right? Like, so you got this app. What's it for? Right? We've gone past the stage of what it's app. Now we're going to the stage of what's it for.
And you join.
At the very beginning, you might want to know things like, what the hell is the system for?
And you're talking to people now. There's a whole bunch of other people.
It's very abstract, right? Like, before we get to other people, it's very abstract. Like, where are you going to get your information from to begin with? Education Guild. Right? We need to establish your Education Guild, aka an access to information portal.
And this is one of the first things that's conveyed to anybody who joins is that, okay, look at the pinned message, the sticky, whatever you want to call it.
So you get
the
a
main
choice.
message. You can go to the wiki.
So now pretend you have a choice. There's a bunch of servers out there that have collections of people that know what to educate you about, the natural guilds.
So we're one of a million.
So yeah, so you now have an ability to select. Do you want to connect to this dashboard to give me my skills? Do I want to connect to that dashboard? And they're not going to be ranked amongst their own internal coherence between themselves. So you're going to see dashboards that are about the natural guilds that are incoherent to dashboards that have effectively become coherent. You select one and you go through it, and immediately, because there are people participating in that dashboard to make it coherent already, you have access to a network of individuals who have participated in that guild to begin with, and so that completes your fundamental guild quote-unquote registration process. That joining of a specific network about education completes the full circle, because now you're reaching out to other people who you could create this yourself if you want. But this is the latter stage that I was alluding to before. If you've gone through the stages before and then done it yourself, that would be more appropriate.
Right.
Because that's how you start.
So you're joining an environment which has effects of higher coherence already built into it.
And you get to select, and you get to pick your cases. You get to join multiples if you need to, whatever. It's going to blend in. So if you want your education guild to be consistent of this proximal guild and that proximal guild, this could all merge. There's no limitations to this because it's all transient. Right. So they could think of themselves as separate guilds. You, viewing them, can make them one guild in your own dashboard.
Sure.
Stuff like that. So as soon as you've reached out to any, and this is the first step, to the natural guilds, you are getting networks upon networks upon networks of proximal guilds that fulfill that role.
Right, which is kind of rare. Any guild will educate and teach to its own little thing, but very rarely you'll have higher and higher coherence itself, right?
And this is why you can merge guilds from your perspective. Like
by coherence.
Right, because if they're an education guild, and they're an education guild, but separately they're different proximal guilds, you can merge everything they say into one proximal dashboard of education guild.
Yeah, and you may just call it the guild. That's
right.
As we do.
You don't want that differentiation.
So you're trying to say, I think, there is a kind of overarching emergence, a thing that emerges over top of all these little activities.
Without emergence, this does not work.
Without even thinking about it, the guild emerges on top of what we do as a corporation. Let's say we incorporate and all this kind of stuff and educate and certify, and what others do as well. you should be able to see a smooth surface over top, sheltering the whole thing.
Right. So imagine we, as a corporation, take it upon ourselves to create a server out there that all it does is simply says that Education Guild lies here. One. An Education Guild lies here. Other people will connect to it, start processing its immersion.
So server,
its coherence. If
server,
you
this is
lifting it up by participating in it. We can create 1, we can create 3, we can create 4. This one will have this properties, this one will have lower property, whatever. They become a selection of a list of selection. You can just add and add and add.
Server,
and add.
it's an aggregation of guilds.
Right. It's just a facilitator of connections.
Right.
More
and
facilitation.
Web of Trust, we all should be that server, but we don't all have to be. We need access to some servers.
And you can become this guild, that guild, that guild, that guild, based on the primarily on the coherence of the activities themselves. Like, are you coherent in this guild? Therefore, your representation of that guild is way more in the full context of the network, and so on and so forth. It's incredibly what you call transient. Like, you cannot ever fathom where you are ranking personally, unless you have a context with which to rank with. And so you can talk bullshit in this network, but its propagation chances...
Well, the power of that is in the Web of Trust.
Exactly.
I think.
Exactly. But you're not excluded from expression. You're not... Okay.
Right.
COVID-19 stuff.
It just computationally...
imagine those feeds.
Any artifact or signal coming over the network comes with a trust metric, let's say, and that's how many of your peers also kind of know about this thing, and what do they know about it, and then that gives you an enhanced view of it. And then
at the same time, if you're sitting at the bottom level of the lobby, you're going to hear everything. None of it is going to be filtered.
Right, and it's expected. That doesn't.
So the motivation is not to exclude, but to rise.
And because that's there, it doesn't detract from the.
It can't if you rise, because
it doesn't detract from the higher coherence.
Where is the spam gonna go?
Spam has to go to the lobby.
Where is it never gonna come out of?
The lobby.
It's gonna be trapped.
Right.
It's gonna be fundamentally stuck there.
But at the same time, everything is an opportunity. Like, let's say somebody spams. Maybe it's a bot. It's completely not even a person.
Sure, it has a good idea.
But
sure.
But let's say some spam is like somebody doing their.
It's like it's
these
like
multi-level marketing things. Like, that's an opportunity to connect with somebody potentially. Like, this is a human being.
Reutilize the spam that happens over here.
Right.
For the coherence trajectory.
Like, you're trying to build up and become better and help people.
The market system is destroying. We're taking that wreckage, rebuilding. That's the metaphor. And just keep rebuilding life back out of the death that it's causing. That's the archetypical stuff, but whatever.
Yeah. So, I'd like to kind of just drill towards a little bit this app that we're making, and
I got my square, man.
And what does it look like? What do you start off with? Okay. So, and we are describing the Portal Mountain network as well as if it is this app, but Telegram obviously doesn't give us the features that we need to sort by coherence and all this kind of stuff. Web of Trust. So it's completely not there.
Can I only take over simply because of the power user elements that I have with app building?
Yes. Like, full acknowledgement. You are the programmer developer. I do other things.
I do program for a living, yes, and then this is part of my job is to actually criticize applications.
I will try to interject as much as I can, but
All right, let's move to our
Let's start.
primary UX
We started
picture,
a bit with a local dashboard, having a profile and all that kind of stuff.
which we can skip for an application's purpose
Okay.
introduction, because a lot of profile stuff is common. It's about your name, it's about your picture, it's about whatever identifying handles
Yeah.
you might have connecting you to something else.
Right.
To
And
identify you as
now-
one particular identity versus another.
Now we are talking about interacting with other people on a network.
Right.
That's the baseline here.
So,
And we're talking about conversation as well.
so two things.
And we're almost out of paper.
There is the person interacting with the system, but then there is the system they use to interact with the system to begin with, right? So it's a secondary step, because when you create yourself in a system, right, you're using the system's signals, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
to inject something into itself.
Right. You have to
Right,
conform to a
You're
system.
kind of bootstrapping something. You're giving it another thing to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And
first off
and
the bat-
wait, sorry. In the context of us as Portal Mountain, representing Portal Mountain, an organization, we are talking about the model we produced and a product expanding out into the network to allow activists, people who have awoken from the long process of commodification, who have woken up to what's happening, to communicate and be able to raise coherence. In other words, we know, you and I know people who are, let's say, express high coherence, and we want to network with them and be able to make space in technology that there are high-level discussions happening.
So,
And
okay.
this is the guild networking, which is
Okay.
kind of
So,
high-level
so,
discussion.
so this is to take in a static situation in. Static.
That's what we're at. Where we're
Static.
at. Let's say we're at that.
The reason I say static is because we have a database of individuals who satisfy certain criteria which we can query and assert certain things about in that picture. So we have one reality, and we can calculate a number of things out of that reality. That's
Fine.
that's the premise of that statement, right?
The whole network and the people in it.
Now, the difficulty I will introduce into this is the fact that any step, regardless of what it is going to change the static nature of the
course.
thing you're calculating from to begin with.
And,
So
yep.
so the variability is incredibly undefined. You have to introduce this variable to get that variable. You have to introduce this variable to say that variable.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you have to make assertions upon assertions upon assertions only to get any definitive answers to begin with, which means, in layman's terms, is that you're creating reality.
Right.
You're basically creating reality as you're trying to analyze it.
Right.
That's the gist of the problem.
So let me break this down a little bit into kind of assumptions that our network is represented by Portal Mountain Network, the Telegram network, our groups and the lobby and all that kind of stuff. Like we have our own media.
Mm-hmm.
Other networks, other people have their own media as well. So what we are trying to do here is interface with those other media and assess coherence. This is for this group, that group, that group, that group. Some will have high coherence. God willing, some will have even a similar coherence as to ours, the mimetic and all this, the fundamentals. We will see it, that they have it And this is like the highest level connection of guild networking, in that we say, okay, you're also a certification authority, basically. We'll recognize you as that.
Okay.
But to branch out and to
this is a jump. This is a jump from focus all the way up to the trade guild.
Trade.
There's a few steps missing, basically. Trade.
Right.
Because trade is the guild that deals with the import and output of material that is reduced to currency.
Trade.
And notice how far up it is.
Correct. Okay, so
It's not a very simple process to get.
Okay.
It's
so
way up there.
what you mean by trade basically is that what we are trying to do and embody and all this kind of stuff is also done and embodied at some other spot, and we can say, okay, here you go, you also do that, and we will give our, like we
what I'm saying
there's a
is
flow
that
happening.
this is where we have a formalization. In other words, we have a symbolic representation for what it means.
So we will recognize if that other guild, whatever they're doing or saying, we will recognize it at that level. We trade it.
It depends on the action. Yeah, it's not dependent on rank status, if you will. But any interaction, any interaction that's done economically, in terms of currency,
Economically, yep.
A reduction to currency. So taking one thing,
which could be a
reducing
certificate
it to a number,
it could be a certificate,
and
on a
then
body.
using that same number to represent the other thing.
In the online world, we would say, okay, you've recognized this person as a mechanics guild, or whatever, or some guild. Based on our trade, since we're a certification authority, you're a certification authority, you recognize and certified that person, we will tell our people, this person is recognized and certified, even though we didn't do it. That's what trade.
It's token
trade is, right?
It's token validation. All it is token validation and verification. So, if you have a token representation of something, right? Okay, this object is costing this much in currency, token representation in currency. That means that you can derive a different identity for the object through the currency and trade.
Yes.
Trade in meaning.
Okay, so let's say this foreign academy. This foreign academy has taught somebody up, or not taught, but just recognized up to a point that they are in the academy of this other place because we have a trade relationship at that level. They're also a member of our academy, essentially.
They would recognize the demand and supply trajectory. That's the key. Demand and supply trajectory is the thing that would unify any and all guild institutions. Right? You have to represent
demand and supply trajectory. I don't know what that means.
So you have multiple institutions to fulfill demand.
Yep.
And multiple institutions to supply demand. Right? And multiple corporations to supply.
Okay, so we're talking about business structures in which, let's say, a director has to be a master, or whatever. This company needs a director. That company has somebody who's in their academy of this company. That academy member can come over to be a director here. That's trade, supply, demand.
Yeah, exactly. Correct. It's a kind of like a quantum, if you will, tunneling situation.
As a potential, we don't know if all
metaphorically
other
speaking,
factors.
No, I'm trying to appease the physics.
Okay.
The physical triggered. It's a metaphor.
I wasn't triggered. For what physics?
Uh,
I didn't hear
the ability to jump from one place to another.
like, did you say quantum or something?
I said
missed
quantum tunneling.
it. Oh, okay. Right. So our system incorporates quantum tunneling.
In a metaphorical sense.
In a literal sense, too.
Based in the metaphor.
I'm just playing.
Based in the metaphor, yes.
Just playing. Okay, so we can see like this bigger...
Conservation of energy is still at play.
As we should see this bigger kind of picture of organizations all together building something bigger. And this is what we have going up the stack, through trade, computing, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And we're talking about describing society, a social operating system.
So right? Yeah, trade, the guild, acts as the membrane that we mentioned before for the interchange of not necessarily protecting the inside from illegal activity consequences. This is not the point, but rather forming a shelter for economic activities that don't get hampered by property rights and
right.
and other
state-based
legislation
state-based apprehensions of the land.
Right. So it's a way to remove restrictions for the purpose of not going against that current, but for the purpose of coexistence with the current as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that the interchange between through the membrane protects the activity
and
that is fundamentally normal and natural.
This is just basic holonic natural stacking, if you will, but the holonic web, that's the way it works. Things need to be sheltered and protected and watched over, and those are the things that continue,
right.
continue on.
And the kind of things that we're saying we're quote unquote protecting against are things like sustenance versus currency. For example, you can't eat money.
No.
Right? So so the representation of value, if you will, has to be managed in a more concrete sense, in that you can't use the appearance or disappearance of numerical values in a system in its ability to affect the nutritional value in that system.
Right.
For example, we're trying to break away from stipulations that are arbitrarily placed into a system that cause lack in an arbitrary sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is no condition on the planet that involves the lack of food.
Well, it's obviously,
for example, for everybody who's alive today. The only condition that makes it possible is one of logistics, which is completely based on planning and our abstract thinking and on and so forth.
I think that the separation of our needs and of the commodification of our abilities is pretty stark and obvious. That we need some things, and we can do some things, but on the market, this kind of shell idea that on the outside, okay, I can do things, this inside can do things, but on the market, this is what's valued. That's what's valued. If you are doing something that's not valued on the market, you won't be sustained.
Right. Buy that same.
And we are part of all this.
And so the point being is that we need to formulate a shelter that does satisfy the requirements of the ongoing onslaught of the natural market as it appears.
Natural
And
market.
well, it is a natural appearance. It's not. It's not here.
I like that. That's very endearing.
Well, it's not here because of like alien forces. It's here because of teeth, and claws. It's here because,
In a sense, yes.
it's here because we have a rudimentary need to respond to the environment in a calculated way.
And if we don't, we'll die.
Precisely. So it's not there because it's not here because
The teeth and claws are still there. They're just abstracted all to fuck.
what we've done with it is the problem, not the thing. What we've done with it. And we've extrapolated the life and death situation into an abstraction that does not reflect back living itself. So that disconnect between the abstract and the
strange
living
loop. I love to point at the strange loop.
is really where the disconnect is, and so putting that back into play is the only real goal of the entire conversation happening here.
Lots of things like to exist for their own sake, and it's amazing how much exists for its own sake, and that's the mind.
And if you want to, let's end that thought with the death circle.
The death what?
The death circle.
Death circle?
The ants.
Oh, okay, metaphor. Ants walking around in a circle, following their own pheromones. They don't know.
The signal system fails.
At a lower layer, the pheromone signals are telling a horde of ants, army ants, to walk in a circle, and most of them never escape or survive. They'll go till they die. Boom. You want to elaborate on the death circle?
Did I mention the death circle before we left?
Yeah, just barely, but we've never used that as a metaphor. So army ants, I described it quickly, get trapped in a circle because of the pheromones.
Yeah.
Tell them to go there.
So the metaphor here to take away,
and this came up in chat,
is that whenever you try to have ordered systems, they are susceptible, effectively, to a condition that gives them a self-circulating capacity in that
cancer.
Basically, cancer is an example. The death circle of the ants is another.
We would use cancer as a typical example.
But the death circle is an actual great visual example. It's the same metaphor in a system that has a lot of potential, a lot of capacity for interaction with its world.
But it fucks up.
But what it's doing with its own signals is wrapping and ramping them around into a single cycle, if you will, such that it becomes ignorant of anything else and starts to cycle and cycle and cycle what's called a death circle, because the participants in the cycle, while they feel busy accomplishing tasks and whatnot, are actually accomplishing tasks towards an end of itself.
I just got an image that probably isn't appropriate for this, but I'm gonna say it anyways. Like,
Sure.
like a Muslim mass when they're like circling around the temple in the middle. I don't know if that's too triggering.
It's not. It is triggering, but it's not far off. It's not far off.
Well,
because,
with many, we'll caveat, many religions are equally as far off.
Yes, this happens with places in Catholicism where there's a saint or whatever rock they want to touch a lot of.
Yeah.
For example. So in most of these situations, the mythology of doing the act overrides the actual consequence of said action in reality.
Fine.
And in such a sense, yes, it becomes its own version of a despot. It might not cause a physical death, but it causes a death of thought.
Certain
It
death,
causes
yeah.
a death of...
Right. So this is a good metaphor, I think. Religion in general, a lot tend to go the superstitious route, in which the loop is broken.
in which the loop is self-sufficient.
And you have these death circles.
By broken, we mean it doesn't connect with anything outside itself. It's a loop that is self-perpetuating,
Right.
like perpetual motion, which is a fallacy. We all know. And nothing in the world works on perpetual motion, which is another trajectory or tangent we can logically take and to assimilate to say that, hey, when you bind yourself to a cycle, do you really want to stay?
No, that one's open.
Okay. Just wondering
Is
about
good.
ventilation.
It's good. It's a good metaphor, the religion thing, I think.
Yeah, because, well, if you look at religion, like look at ants and look at religion, what you'll see is that in the ant world, all of these signals are meant to perpetuate the colony further and further out in terms of, existence. It just needs to exist.
Right.
But
That's
circles...
the point of the pheromones and all that.
Yeah, but the circles end up killing its failures, if you will. The failure to expand this way, because this algorithm does not work for that expansion, right? Like circling does not work for colony expansion, right? But circling is a property of all the elements that the colony can do. Right?
Right.
So it's one of the variants that it can take on.
It's almost like your dashboard
Right.
saying, here's food, go get the food. But then whatever happens in the meantime can be a circle, can happen.
Right. And here's the great example as to what the difference might be between a polymorphic machine and a market machine.
The dashboard will never say go on a loop. But that's what could happen as a result of using the dashboard. That's
right.
What I'm kind of saying.
Right. It doesn't give you the option to. It doesn't stop you.
The dashboard doesn't say here start a loop. There's no ant signal. Hey
ru-
everybody, let's do a death circle.
Yeah.
And then they all started.
The rules of the dashboard are such that you can start a death circle and therefore
Right.
perpetuate yourself
But
into
not
irrelevance.
Not explicitly. That's not one of the functions of the dashboard.
No, this is one of the dangers of its usage.
Right.
In fact, this is like one of the main things that will be like a caveat. If you use that, it has a propensity to cause this, it has a propensity to cause that, and those are reflective of, again, the natural world, which can kill itself.
And it would be better if a tree falls.
And we're not stepping in the way of that.
If a whole tree falls on top of that circle, it'd be better for every single end. A catastrophe, calamity, in other words.
Assuming the connection point is such that it kills them.
Or severed, yeah.
Ants are
completely disrupted.
Ants are kind of
they might keep doing it over the tree.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
So yeah, another point to take into account is that you might sever a good chunk of the functionality, but if you're not severing the cells that make up the functionality, you're not necessarily purifying yourself out of a particular existence here or there.
So better than a tree falling, it'd be better if somebody came with a broom and just swept the shit out of that circle, just blasted the shit out of it. Nothing recognizable.
Better would be a situation in which the signals that each ant relays were somehow modified towards a different path. A capacity only the human can have.
Okay, so let's say your death
archetype.
Let's say your death circle is happening here, and there's a trail this way and a trail that way. Let's say the human creates a cut in this and causes all the ants to go this way and around it. So it becomes a path. Becomes a path now.
It's about a breaking of a pattern.
Sure.
And all of it is because habits are patterned. Mm-hmm. All activities are patterned by habit. I'm not talking to you from a completely nullified perspective of like, oh, this is a goddamn new situation, and here I'm talking to Brian yet again. No, I'm habituated. I'm habituated by our previous conversations. I'm habituated by my own experiences. Mm-hmm. You're habituated. All of this is like, it's not the cycles. The death circle itself is the pattern, is the habit, and it's not a death circle if you recognize it. Right, because you can introduce different signals into the circle. Okay,
this is a difference between the ants out. Participation, membership. Membership can recognize.
Guesting.
Participant cannot.
Guests are cycling around something. Participants are given a new signal, but they might still circle around it. Mm-hmm. Members see the connection between the two situations and go, those are pivot points. The actual things are self-selected.
Voila. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No queen. No pattern. This pattern could mean walk this way, but it doesn't have to anymore.
Right. Correct.
And this is where we separate from the animal, where the ant cannot make that decision. We can. We can take a signal and choose its opposite meaning. We can choose to derive yet another meaning that's not an opposite,
which is very important. We're probably talking about sapience or sentience.
We're talking about the difference between a
the
symbol and the sign.
In model speak, this ability is something.
is to make the sign out of the symbol. In model speak, this is where that comes up, because this artifact is this signal, but it could be this signal and that artifact.
Many signals mean many different things. If the signal means to you a specific sign, then that's what you'll be bound to. If the signals can mean many different things,
and if the symbols, not just signals.
Symbols, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Symbols are an amalgamation of signals.
Symbol, sign.
Because signals are too rudimentary. Signals are like totally responsive, but the combination of it, what does that mean?
Signals are way down there, way down there.
But yeah, this is the point of differentiating the symbol.
Can't read it.
The string of signals. Mm-hmm. One string of signals being the symbol into a sign. And why this is a differentiating matters, because this string of signals making this symbols could be the same sign as another string.
It's great that we
Stop and stop.
We kind of dipsy-doodled.
Is it the word? Is it the shape? Is it the color? You know what I mean?
Signal,
like,
symbol.
Does red mean stop? Does the word stop mean stop?
So
all of that.
It's great that we delved into different layers of this, the holonic structure and all that kind of stuff, and we can see the same typical thing happening at lower layers, right? So that is great. Just spam. I got called by spam, but symbol, signal, yeah, and this ability to differentiate between the two and to navigate it, and that's what we're talking about with this ant death spiral, the death circle, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and
to be able to step out of what the structure is.
The sign is still below the artifact sign. Look, it's what the sign is what makes up the artifact. What do I need to do if I see red? What do I need? Like, what is the artifact? What is the final algorithm that is meant by said sign? Does it mean stop my car? Does it mean put this in my mouth?
It's like a collection of symbols all together. Mean do this all together symbol action.
First, the symbols solidify into signs. Do this, do that, do this, do that. Exactly. And then they solidify into an artifact that combines them. Combines them. Do this, then that, then this.
Depending on context.
Right.
And this is all repeating patterns, repeating up the stack. This is some old school shit right here, that chart and all that.
Yeah.
Old school.
Very. Okay. Back to just trying to get into the app. We're back in the screen.
Shall we?
And we're back to here.
Look at that. Beautiful.
Yeah. This is my screen representation of the chat room that you encounter if you were to quote-unquote download our hypothetical app.
Now, I'm just going to... what do you call it? Take that. Yep. We're just gonna look right at this beautiful thing.
Yeah, and,
take it away.
This
was a quick idea. You drew this up super fast. So we want to make probably different screens. And how are we interfacing with the guild network?
Okay, so first point of curiosity.
What is the dashboard interface?
Acclamation. Let's start with acclamation. What are we acclimating to? So, what is the... To answer that is to answer what assumptions are we making. The assumptions I personally am making, which Brian kind of confirmed for me, which is actually an exercise for the watcher, the reader, the watcher, whatever, is to take this idea and to kind of criticize it as much as possible. So, first things first, the notion of this application comes from the fact that we are stepping into society that has smartphones.
Right.
The ubiquitous computer screen at the tip of their fingers that they can manipulate with their thumb, if you will.
This is our environment.
So
correct.
That's the overreaching assumption based on
so we're
made in the software itself.
Just a note, and I think we should do this right now, is drive as hard as we can to this app and what it looks like.
Okay. So first things first, like any app you might find yourself in,
you make a profile. That's the first thing, right?
It might want to know some kind of identifier for who the hell you are and whatever. So that includes your name, that includes your whatever email address you might want to associate yourself with.
Right.
Any other externalities that can be quantified, aka you can be given an identity with.
Profile. And this is the loopback interface, basically, representing.
Right. So that's kind of like step one.
We want to move beyond that because we've talked the fuck out of that.
Yeah. So that's the like that's what you get in the step that you game the app. You get to input who you are into it, which fundamentally is a way to any technology to keep track of anything.
Yep. You're having an agent, let's call it.
Right. You create what's called an agency. An agency in the world of the guild. In what the guild calls the ontological matrix in the model. So the guild accepts this as a reality for itself, and it uses
Agency.
that.
Yep.
So it uses the quote-unquote concept of ontological matrix to validate, if you will, your agency within it, which is an ephemeral...
Ontological matrix. We're talking about a model of worlds,
right.
of environment.
Right. Those
models.
those matrices themselves, they come into existence and they disappear. But that's not the point of the software. The point of the software is not to keep track of that whatsoever.
Right.
So
what's the point?
what the profile does is give you a representative handle into the network at large.
Right. So
that's about it.
First off, the profile itself is a dashboard. It's
Yes.
your dashboard, quote unquote, bound to your body, whatever your space.
Agency.
Your agency, right? And that's what you.
Whatever you define that to be, that's what it is in the large scale.
So
You're not limited to one, by the way. There's no one profile limitation, but in this case, because that would be
Right.
absurd.
No, but you're joining a network of dashboards.
You choose a profile to join a network of dashboards.
Right. That's what this is, a network of dashboards, right?
So you already the concept of identity is split up across different conceptual boundaries. There's no one-to-one as to you being the dashboard.
Right. And there shouldn't be. Yeah?
There's multiple dashboards of
Doesn't make sense.
your agency
Now,
out there.
Quick aside, we'll try not to do these, but social credit score bound to your biometrics, to the biometrics of your being, that's fucked up. Okay, this is not that.
Yeah.
So back from that aside, don't even talk about it. We're just saying like that's
Oh,
a
no.
juxtaposition.
I think what I've said already makes it clear that you can take on multiple identities
So the
if you
idea,
need to be.
hey, you don't like it anymore? Make a new ID, make a new dashboard, build a new one. Nobody cares.
Yeah, it's only the coherence that
This
really
is
is
the-
affecting it.
This is due to the focus on.
Exclusion and
Remember we're
inclusion.
talking about exclusion and inclusion.
You can't
right?
do that.
You got it.
We can't play the same game.
So if you're focused on inclusion, it doesn't matter how many dashboards you create
if they're all incoherent,
to represent your own loopback.
if they're all incoherent,
If they're all incoherent, right, and then people keep track of this is that guy's last 100 dashboards that he made, and keep track of that. Some people will try to do that, and that's fine. But this is all.
it could be no. If somebody tries to do that, here's the thing. Somebody tries to do that, that would be like one dashboard's worth of articulation.
It's a special
into the full system.
It's a special dashboard to take care of this person's quote unquote. Like you're trying to be that Chinese system.
So if you want to trust them to tell you how it is, sure, that could happen. But on the other hand, if you feel like this person is being shunned for the wrong reasons,
Right.
and everything that they have to say is just not being heard because everybody else is shunning them, you're not blocked from actually being able to hear them out.
Right.
You're not blocked on the
Yeah,
airwaves.
that's important, because when you're shunned, a lot of people still would be talking to you if they didn't feel like they were threatened themselves to be associating.
All responsibility lies within the hearer. All of it. And that responsibility absolves anyone else from being blamed for you not liking what you hear. You're gonna have to deal with the input.
Responsibility in the here. I feel that. I know that. I've heard that, but I don't want to get too off track here because we are currently.
It's just a side effect. It's a side effect of the actual operation of the software. Let's put it that way. You can't block people. Not that way.
Right.
You can't block people
And
based on perceived harassment. You can't.
Well,
it's
okay.
fine to not listen.
Okay,
to
come back to agent-centric versus data-centric. Agent-centric says, I do not want to hear that person. I will not listen to them. Data-centric says,
that person
this
should
person
not be heard.
should not be heard. They are banned from the network.
Exactly. That's a problem.
Right.
Because
so we incorporate that. Now let's carry on with our app. What are we doing with our first screen? So somebody has somebody has a profile. They make a profile and then they join. What are they joining? How do they know who to join?
You're joining. Okay. Let's make the assertion that they join the Telegram group.
So
Mountain.
Wait. I download this application program to chat. What node on the network do I connect to tell me what network exists?
You don't know. You don't know.
It comes from who told you to download the application. They said,
might.
This is a cool application. Download that. It's gonna ask you what network index to use to point to. Type in portalmount.in, whatever. Like our website.
If somebody else told you to download that application,
no, I'm telling you, this is the network how it works, right?
Sure. Yeah.
We're getting back to like torrents. How did torrent work?
Okay, but
a torrent is a list of IP addresses.
Okay.
Which could give you entrance to the Portal Mountain network, for example. Okay.
That's one.
This is a peer-to-peer type naming scheme, DNS, all this kind of shit. All right. So you would obviously
hear about it from somewhere, but hearing it from somewhere does not equate to trusting their sources of information.
Of course.
So, for example, I get the notion about the application from you.
Okay.
But I really look from what I've seen in your network.
Trust.
So from what I've seen in your network, a lot of people talk a lot of shit.
Fringe.
I don't like it.
Yep.
Like, say I don't like it. I need to be able to choose that I'm not connected necessarily to you just because you mentioned this to me. You can take whatever point you want for introducing me to it.
This is an absolute necessity that one could never know or tell how they came into the network. This is a private function. That's your database.
Exactly.
This is the point of a peer-to-peer database. You have those privacy options.
The only thing
available.
your introduction of me into the network supplies is the potential to connect with XYZ networks.
So in actuality, if I give you the application, if I tell you to join my network,
you're making a suggestion.
You end up getting branded with my network because your identity comes through my people.
Okay, sure. The first encounter request.
But it would be known.
Could be recorded.
This would
for
come.
something.
That's how data propagates over the network about people.
Sure.
Or broadcasts.
I don't see that
Think
as
about
an
it. So
issue.
I'm taking your point.
Is that as an
I'm
issue?
taking your point at a 100% security-minded networking computer infrastructure point of view.
You're not talking
that
about.
You want a place where anybody can know. Okay, this is the Portal Mountain Network or whatever it's called. This is the Guild Network. The Guild Network. You can just go to a website and everybody goes to this damn website or something. It's not like. You have public anonymous ways of getting the software and getting linked into. It's like Reddit. Here's the Barrie Reddit. Here's the Toronto Reddit.
Okay, that carries the case for it. Is look, if an event happens, what kind of information is pertinent to the event? What kind of information is just there to stew on and make deductions on later? And my sense is that we do not transmit any kind of information that can be stewed on. That's not relevant. And I'm making that point simply because people grow.
This is a great
You
point.
have to
Aside
take
from
it
just
for
joining
what
the
it
network,
is.
but what your reputation becomes.
Coherence
the guild
takes care of that.
Okay, coherence at a membership guild takes care of that. Can continually bring people and life back into the system, even whatever it's past. Membership knows this.
Right, and the way that propagates effectively is that if you are the business in your own little local bubble, right, that is completely unpopular with anyone else,
right,
for ongoing reasons, right? The reputation is ongoing. It's always ongoing.
Trust calculations.
So if you're starting to dance there, you might make a mark at the bottom somewhere for somebody's attention, for legitimacy purposes. Legitimacy purposes.
Nobody sees themselves. Nobody has a dashboard to reflect their own being. This is the point of the dashboard. People don't see themselves in what they're doing and how far
all
off
that information reflected back to them, I guess.
their own behavior, how far off it may be from.
Because all of those stats could be reflected back.
Let's say by default
I didn't think of that.
In a social platform.
I didn't think of this.
In a social platform, you have, what does this type of person think of me? And you're given that whole story of what they feel you are, and what does
if you try
this
to talk
person
to them
and
this
this
way,
person,
it makes no
right?
sense.
And this is how to communicate with that,
right?
And so to give a self, this is what the dashboard ultimately is to give a view of the self in context, to work with these relationships and do society, social operating systems, including what comes up from the individual self.
If I were to simplify this a little bit,
please.
Imagine you're like an atheist. I'm a Christian. The standard deviation from the concepts, if you will.
And we're both good people, though. Somehow
we're great. We're fine with everybody else.
Somehow we're both good. Great.
So basically, what you're saying is that, I lost my train of thought. Can you repeat that so that I catch on again?
Well, to be honest, it can never be repeated.
Can you repeat what you were saying then?
No, I'd have to get back up to speed because.
Damn it.
We're into some special ass territory, and it was so new. It was levels of nuance upon nuance. So we could.
No, I had a thought on what you were saying though. This is like it was supposed to complete it. Anyway,
I believe you. Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going so that we don't lose momentum.
Yeah. Well, just to note, we've got about half hour left in the recording.
Mm-hmm.
With the 4-hour limit, which we try not to go over, primarily because YouTube actually keeps going, but when I take the file and send it to transcription, if it's over 4 hours, they say chop it up, whatever. Right? So we've always kept to a 4-hour limitation. But even that, there's complaints. Just to go meta here, I think we can kind of just spill out to, a semi-break period. Like, let's try to just flow a little bit with... We can try to remember, we're, talking about web of trust and an application, all this kind of stuff.
Most of the complaints do not actually pertain to what we're doing. So it's kind of difficult to answer everything.
Exactly.
Most of the complaints center around, like, what does this abstract idea that we're talking about do for me? So, in other words,
correct.
What is it that we're selling you in such a way that you, sitting there spending your time on it, might gain
yes.
materialistically from it?
What will you get?
And fundamentally, this is the wrong interpretation of the work itself.
However, this is maybe I can zoom out, but this chart diagram, I title it Potential Chains of Events, and it's about interactions with people and what they might be interested in. So I kind of sectioned this off as first off, there's a body, there's a being, you recognize, you make eye contact.
Shelter. There's a shelter at play.
So you make eye contact. Just
shelter to shelter.
Second, acquaintance is cool. So there's somebody is a cool.
Sorry.
And then, so where do you go from there? I thought, activism, networking, and organization of things, society, corporation, people.
Right. Okay, hold on.
So what this is a kind of a conversational ingress of when you encounter somebody. First you're a person, then you're cool with each other, and then you talk about either one of these things.
Are these steps you go through within yourself?
No, this is a categorization of what I'm seeing as what's happened. What people tend to be interested in, activism, networking, or organization.
In the context of conversation.
We are encountering a being,
So
peer-to-peer, you walk up to somebody. Cold talk. Could be. Maybe it's a friend, maybe you don't know them at all.
So, okay, no, walk me through an example, though. Like, really.
This is...
Like, imagine I don't know you.
So we're talking about the virus, the envelope and the payload, right? You got to incorporate that.
You're kind of jumping
envelope,
subjects here.
Payload. So, yes. So it's good that you recognize that subject because we're talking about quote-unquote viral replication of Portal Mountain.
This is slightly outside of
everything
we've been talking
evangelism. This,
it's outside what we've been talking
go
about.
to a church and what do they call evangelism? Door to door, what this or that, or you see somebody in a parking lot or whatever. It's your opportunity. You walk up and there's people in space and something happens. It's called evangelism.
It's outside of what we've been talking about, though, right?
Typically, but this has been a topic. So,
no,
anyways, I just thought that this was like a really cool tangent.
All right. Okay.
Because this is what you talk to people to get into the network of ideas. And I tried to so here's the guild. There's the guild, like ideas, but it's an idea kind of, this is where it starts. This is what normal people can talk about. And these are the related ideas related to what normal people can talk about. And these are where it leads in a network of ideas.
This is more of your mental network right now than one I can understand. because I can't follow it.
No, you almost shouldn't probably be able to follow it. Everybody would have their own idea of what this is, and that's exactly right what you said.
So maybe run me back through the beginning as to like how I could potentially map this out for myself, because it's not clear.
So,
person. You start with person. There's something there. I can see that.
mm-hmm.
Perception of something, the grabbing of a soundbite as being reality.
Yeah, so acquaintance I had here is pretty arbitrary. What's an acquaintance? But yes, connecting on something, some understanding.
All right, so now you have two entities communicating. Is that correct?
First was just that this is another. I recognize that's a human being in front of me.
Question.
The next layer is that.
So here's my question.
There's an understanding.
The first one, does it pertain to English exists? Whereas the second one is you and I can speak in English to communicate. Like, does that map to what you're saying?
English itself as existing?
English exists, and secondary to, which is not us. There's nothing to do with us. Secondary to that, we are using English as a thing to pass messages between us.
Yes, okay. So from the layer of that, yes, I think so. Some fundamental exists, and yet acquaintance, it kind of implies definitely a relationship being built of some amount.
So here's my question about English, is because English is the binding thing that makes the two individuals the acquaintances that you're referring to, simply because they're able to relate that, throw that ball of information back and forth.
Correct, and this is savage, but if you don't speak a language even at all, then you're not a person to this algorithm that's detecting.
Right, the savage.
Are you even the basic?
The savage.
And then upon that, do we have communication and connection? Yes, okay. Then it goes from, okay, what am I interested in? And this is my own, so I'm walking you through the thinking of this chart, how it was created. I wanted to think about what do people connect with each other about to discuss the model,
the
to
common interests,
end up discussing the model. What are the possible things that could be a discussion? And then you engage in it. So this is in doing it.
Right. And so meta-analysis on that point is that all of these points of conversations are system provided, because system provides language, aka English, whatever.
Right.
Not only does it provide aka English, whatever, but it also provides the utility of it in the first place. Like, you use these words to indicate this meaning, right? Like, it has that connotation to it.
The system itself is more than just words. It obviously is
mythology.
It's a collection of artifacts and enforcements.
Let me drive us into mythology a bit more. It's the conversation me and Vicky had just recently, in that mythology winds up being this amalgamation of articulation. Everything that can be articulated, everything, is sitting there in mythospace.
Is this a broadcast
a mythology area? A mythology would be a broadcasted conversation, but it will be a forever morphing. It would be a true conversation in one sense, in that it's reshaping itself.
The mythology that in some parts of its mythos describes the part which changes itself and understands itself. And this is the idea of holonic stacking, in that every new layer in its own language has to speak all the languages below in a way that's coherent.
AKA speak about it itself.
Voila.
Why is it there?
This is why within any holon you have representation of just what's out. But
also
depends on which one you're focusing on.
Yeah, regardless of layer, it's going to represent the below.
and this is the problem of having perspectives, even in a network like a guild network and the stuff we're trying to describe. We each have our own perspective of the data.
So far, we've been able to tie it into, technologically speaking,
and it's been hard as fuck to make concrete.
A chat room.
Right, a chat idea.
That is basically flooding you with everything no matter what. So we still haven't moved from the sell point of how do we move from the group chat into something that's actually useful above and beyond that particular presentation of it in technological terms. So we've gone to great lengths to show you how it's like that, and we've gone to great lengths to show you why it's like that, and we still have not covered where do we move from
or
there.
have not come up with anything.
We've touched on coherent. We've come up with it. We've not touched on it. We've come up with coherence.
So here's this feeling that I've been getting is that something is building up. And at this point especially that
building up indeed.
We're moving from emergence from one bootstrap 0, to bootstrap 1.
Talking about it.
That's what I'm just saying. Like this, and you never know what happens.
Okay, so bootstrap
till it
0,
happens.
Bootstrap 0 is us talking about it, correct?
And will continue to be. And bootstrap 0 doesn't stop existing once bootstrap 1 appears above that, right?
Right.
This is
to consolidate.
A loop appropriation apprehension.
Bootstrap 0 is verbal. Is a verbal continuation of
yes.
format.
It has been.
Yeah.
And that's what we have been doing is bootstrap 0 up until now and soon after, ladies and gents. Be right back. What do we got? 20 minutes to go. Yep. The evangelism ting. I think we were
Okay.
talking about.
So first off, evangelism.
Some topics
is
related. We got 15 minutes left.
Evangelism
by the way, so
with an entropic situation makes little sense, but okay.
entropic.
Entropy increasing. So
Right,
evangelism does not
The
really
word
fit
itself.
into that.
So we have to take it back. In other
Yeah,
words.
evangelism is a flawed concept internally, if you will.
So
it
this is
assumes things
this
that
is
are not true.
guild evangelism.
Okay, which transforms itself into being something that's very different
Yeah.
from evangelism.
So we're categorizing like the happenstance of the artifact wake, the wake resonance wake of artifacts causing
Right.
changes outwards based on coherence.
And then the wake conversation is itself very involved.
That's what it is.
So
not putting some intentional framework on top of things necessarily.
No. We're assuming a framework we already built up, but
And through the holonic model, the apprehension, as above, so below. Everything.
I'm not sure what that means.
I'm just
In
just
this
pointing
it's
to the fact
yeah,
that everything
but-
is modeled at the individual level as well. That's what emerges.
yeah,
Kind of thing. We depend on that.
I guess to end it on a useful note, I guess
Sure.
it would be is that
Go for it.
emergence is not a property of the facilitators of the emergence, like the
No.
the pieces that make up the
No,
whole.
no. This is like faith
do
in
not-
God.
Yeah, the pieces that make up the whole do not express the properties in themselves of that whole, and it's not
And-
it's quantifiable in the sense that, for example, you never have pressure in molecules. You have kinetic energy potential, and it's the average kinetic energy potential of molecules that gives you an emergent property of pressure in unison. So the point being is that pressure does not exist without other molecules to begin
Right,
with.
an emergent property. My kind of interesting point here, I think, is that when you're modeling, you model from perspective or context perspective, and each perspective is different from how you model one part of the network or another part. And
So that's qualitative instead of quantitative. Because difference is measured in quality.
damn. But how I think I've had something, but I lost it.
Okay, well, not to derail you or try to derail you. Would be the fundamental difference between mathematical analysis of circumstances versus the kind of analysis we're trying to offer, which is not at all mathematical. To that point is that we cannot quantify anything and say, okay, this is the probability of this happening, this is the probability of that happening. We cannot say definitively from this that emerges. We cannot say definitively any of that.
We can't even say
this
that.
Is not,
we can't even say definitively this is the model.
Right. So
What does that tell you?
On all of those accounts, these are not quantitative statements, and never will be, and they rely on the fact that they will never will be.
Yep. It's a
That
common
might
consequence.
be that might
yeah.
be an arbitrary statement in and of itself, though.
Mhm. General.
The point being is not so much.
taken. Yeah.
The point being is not so much in the qualitative assertions that are made, but the qualitative analogies that follow. Right. for example, the
Right.
idea of the wake.
Okay, you're just you're apologizing for data right now. It
Sure.
sounds like.
Well, a lot of people get so triggered by the direction of the discussion, quantities of assertions being made, so on and so forth, where most of that problem lies in a different approach to the questions at hand. In particular, we're not seeking to answer the question of what is the probability of, this person doing that given this model. We're not asking those kinds of questions.
And also, this kind of, to me,
Qualitatively, you cannot.
Reminds me back to the idea of acting as an ego or a part of the guild.
Okay, let's make it more mechanical for explanatory purposes. It's as if to ask, what is the resulting narrative out of this situation? What is the resultant narrative for you versus what it is for me? We're in the same situation.
Right. Yeah, context.
Given the same signals.
You have different perspectives.
So even though we're in the same room experiencing the same signals,
so
I hear my own voice as much as you do hear my voice. I hear your voice as much as you hear your voice, and yet different resonances, different wakes, different...
Is this the most common type of solipsism, maybe, as to not see the other perspective and think that reality is real, quote unquote, but meanwhile it's your own model of reality that you're saying is real, and you just keep projecting and applying it on everything?
So if we were to look at it from the perspective of stacks and resonances, in terms of like a field and particles and all that stuff.
You want to understand that there are other people, other agencies on the medium, right?
Solipsism amounts to the ignorance of the wakelets. So that analogy that the front of a wave is itself peaks of an infinite number of waves on that topology, exerting their forces such that they cancel each other out in such a way that it only recreates the original wave.
This is calculus again too. The point of the curve in tangential intersection, all that kind of shit.
Right.
To calculate, it never lines up. And this is the
so if we admit
the masculine and the feminine. Again, we're having sexy times right now. As always, this is exactly what we're talking about. We're at the pinnacle of sexy times.
So yeah, as soon as you start to reflect the perspective of a single wake, or a single resonance wake, in terms of wavelets, you can start to see the discriminatory counterparts in each interaction. If you really analyze it, you can see what keeps up the wake in its current metaphorical velocity in the direction that it's going. And
I guess
each wavelet will infinitely reinstitute and affirm the wake so long as it keeps going, because when they don't, that's what cancels it out.
This is dashboard mechanics,
right?
Through and through.
And in this case, you can't quantify it. You have to qualify it in the sense of, like, in this situation it does cancel. Well, in that situation it does not cancel. It's not a calculation on quantity.
The broadcast is that which makes it through.
Yeah, and you lose the.
Link that up right now. The broadcast, and this is a conversation, is the wakelets, and everything. All convo is all at once.
Right.
Broadcast is what is meaningful out of that. On top of that,
and you can't superimpose a mathematical calculation on top of it, because at each wakelet, if you will, it has its own universe of mathematics. It has its own universe of suppositions. It has its own
Correct.
universe of
Which
axioms.
is unfathomable, but that's that's the way it is.
Unfathomable
right?
and unmathematical, not rational,
Oh yeah.
because this is a translation between word and number, and word and number is a translation of mythological computation towards the actionable computation,
if
and these are not bound to algorithms that can be found in any lower layer.
Sure. Yeah, cool. If the entire universe, every existence in the dimensions of space and time were calibrated and marshaled together to calculate the universe itself, it still wouldn't be enough to give you the answer of what the fucking universe is doing.
Or supposed to do. In particular, because the only reason to calculate what it is you're doing is to figure out what it is you're supposed to do.
That was pretty cool. But dude, we got like 1 minute
I'm gonna leave.
left, and we gotta peace out because things and reasons.
So we got to the point of where if you use the app, you'll be dropped into the same similar situation as the current lobby.
Yeah, the Portal Mountain lobby, we kind of described that a little bit, and
if we were to describe the app further, we might actually fully distinguish it from the rest of technology.
This time we really did give a massive context for the app itself, for the dashboard, and we talked with Savvy Fox. Remember before we used to do 1 or 2 meetings with Savvy Fox to talk about the database itself, which underpins this dashboard technology, right?
Which has morphed since those conversations considerably.
So that'd be good to get into again and all that. And it seems like we're right on the precipice of that, and what we've discovered and discussed here is a great context moving forward. I think for apps, real world applications.
Look, what do we do? What do we do with people that are already essentially completely capable
stuck
of
on the Black Mirror, as they say.
Look, we're already there.
That beautiful device. Anyways, so dude, we're at a matter of seconds. So peace out to all of you. Thank you to all our fans, everybody who's listened. Thank you especially to anybody who has ever commented or said anything or given a thumbs up.
Or a thumbs down.
Even that. Yep. Especially thanks to all our haters. We love you even more. But this is it.